Okay, everybody, it's time for the meeting to start. I'm Larry Powell, Chairman of the Nuclear Materials Committee, and I'd like to welcome everyone to Aiken. Some unusual circumstances here. Everybody's all on edge about the hurricane and evacuations and so forth, so that's to be understood. I'd like to stress to everyone that the meetings are being recorded live, and please state your name and affiliation before speaking. Speak loudly and clearly. Also be warned that the microphones pick up idle chatter. I'd like for everyone to keep on the topics during the meeting. Anyone wishing to answer a question or address the cab must come up to the microphone to speak. This will ensure the online attendees can hear comments or questions. There is no public comment sign-up sheet. Be sure to sign the public sign-in sheet, and cab members should sign the cab sheet as well. I was reminded that none of the DDFOs are available today, so we're just kind of going to have a meeting without them. If we have any questions about protocol or anything like that, we'll just table whatever situation is until the next meeting. But we do have Maxine here, and she knows everything about everything. Okay. I guess before we get into our Maxine, I guess you should do your point of contact update first thing, and then we'll talk about other things. Thank you.
I'm Maxine Maxted. I'm with the Department of Energy, and I'm the liaison for the Nuclear Material Committee. All nuclear material facilities are in sustained operations, which is a good thing. Spent nuclear fuel is being dissolved in H Canyon, another good thing. HB line continues to process plutonium feed material for disposition, good thing. K area introduced the first can of surplus non-pit plutonium for downblending on Thursday of last week. That was the 29th of September. This process blends the plutonium oxide with an inert material, making it no longer usable for weapons. And then 235F continues to address actions for completion of the implementation plan for DNFSB, which is Defense Nuclear Safety Board Recommendation 2012-1. And Randy Clendenning is going to be giving you an update of those 235 actions have been completed to date. So we have all good news today, except for the hurricane.
Thank you, Maxine. According to our agenda, we've got two presentations today, and we'll have those presentations before we have a discussion, our committee discussions. So our first presentation is Building 235F update, and Randall is giving us that presentation. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Randy Clendenning. I was going to give you a brief update on what's been going on since I updated you last, which was about 18 months ago or so. With the 235F project, if you could go to the next slide, there's a couple photographs of it. You saw these the last time, but that's basically the building. It's a big hollow chunk of concrete with a bunch of bad stuff in it. If you go to the next slide, this is our standard slide. 235F is up here. Basically, it's a waste stream at this point. If you go to the next slide, this is the same background material I went through last time. So are there new people here? Probably. Okay. If I go too quick, slow me down. But the building's had numerous missions over the years. The most recent was fabricating plutonium-238 in what is called the Plutonium Fuel Form Facility. We call it PUF. And it was used to construct power sources for NASA to use in deep space missions. The residual material in 9 of the PUF cells was last measured in about 2006. And according to those measurements, there's just a little bit more than about 1.5 kilograms of material spread out amongst those cells, although it's not evenly spread. And the nuclear safety analysts do their number crunching and modeling and everything, and coming out of their analysis, in a seismically induced full facility fire, the calculated unmitigated dose is a very big number, 29,000 rem, on site to co-located workers. We maintain the building in a surveillance and maintenance mode. We take care of the safety-related things, and it mostly sits there. We keep the air conditioned and things like that. The overall objective of what we're doing is to try to minimize the dose that would result if there were an accident to the co-located workers and off-site, although the co-located worker is the largest concern because of the magnitude of the dose. And then when we get done with this, part of this Defense Board recommendation does not define an end state, because that's something we'll have to negotiate that with the state at a point later. And one of the things we'll need to know is how clean were we able to clean it up before we can enter into those negotiations. So if we can go to the next slide. The key things that we've gotten done since I talked to you last is we've completed a contractor and a DOE readiness review process, and the department has authorized work to proceed in the west side. The cells are divided up, and I'll show you some pictures later. There's cells going down both sides, but we authorize work to proceed on the west side, which is the side that contains the lower amounts of activity, and that's to allow the contractor, I won't say practice, but that's basically what it is. The risk is lower there. That's where it would make sense to start there and then learn our way over to the other side as we develop techniques and things. We've completed the mechanical and electrical isolation of those cells, which is important for doing the work. It's an old building, it's an old facility. You think you know where all the wires go, but sometimes you don't. So they go through a very deliberate process, as they do like they would if they were going to D&D an entire building, to go through and very deliberately ensure that all the electrical power has been isolated, and anything mechanical that could interfere is either known or isolated. We've removed the outer shield windows on cells 3 through 9, but we did 6 through 9 first, and I have a picture of that a little later. We've established cell lighting, which is kind of anticlimactic when you see what we did. We basically got, when we started, we thought we were going to use I guess they were halogen bulb lamps on the outside of the cell to shine through, which generate a lot of heat. And they've since, well, the price has come down, which is, that's not an issue, but we found the LED lights now. So those lights provide a lot of light and generate no heat, so it's perfect for what we're doing with them. But we've set those up in the cells, and you'll see a photograph that shows a lot of that. We've completed, we're going through a process with SRNL to come in and do new measurements of the cells to better quantify the material that's in them. That 1.5 kg number that I told you about is an old number with older detection equipment and higher levels of uncertainty. So we're looking at going back and redoing that number with newer instruments that are more precise and with a higher degree of certainty in the number. And our experience so far is showing that the number will come out some amount less. Remains to be seen how much less, because we've done the cells that have the least amount in them. But it does look like that with the new measurement techniques and equipment, we're going to find that there is less in there than was calculated the last time they did it. If you can go to the next slide. What we plan to do this year is there are manipulators on these cells. For those, I don't recall whether we've had the board or the subcommittee through there on a tour.
Yeah.
But the manipulators are in there. We go through a process of removing some of those before they take the windows out. So we have this year we plan to remove the outer manipulator control arms from cells 1 and 2. Those are the 2 that are remaining. Those are the 2 cells that have the highest amounts of activity in them. We'll remove the outer shield windows and clean the inner windows of cells 1 and 2. We'll establish cell lighting, and then we'll do the measurements, bring SRNL in and do the enhanced characterization measurements in those 2 cells, and complete mechanical isolation in cells 3, 4, and 5. If you can go to the next slide. So this is a picture of cell 3, 4, and 5. So this is on the east side, which would have the higher levels of activity, but 1 and 2 have the highest, and it kind of goes downhill from there. So 3, 4, and 5 have less activity. But we've removed, this is what it would look like with the windows removed. We put up the chain link to protect the inner window, and then it has lighting in there that you can see. The gray things up above is where the manipulator control arms were that were removed. If you can go to the next picture. This is a picture of cell 1 and 2. Those are the ones that we're targeting to do work on this year. This is what it looks like before you do anything. We need to get the manipulator control arms off. We need to get the windows out. And then we need to get SRNL in there to set up and do their measurements. I thought we had a picture of SRNL somewhere. Can you back up a couple slides? That's a picture of SRNL doing their measurements, and that's the rig that they use, and I believe that is on cell 8. But they'll take this and they'll set it up in each window. They'll do their measurements. Depending on the activity, it may be a 24-hour measurement, it may be longer, maybe shorter, but they'll set up in each window and go through and do that. So we've got all the windows done at this point from the shift operating bay, which is this area in the center, except for 1 and 2. And doing 1 and 2 is what we're planning on doing this coming year. We think we're really focused on trying to stage the activities and get the measurements done so that we can quantify what's in there. So we have a better idea of what the number is based on today's technology, so we basically know what we've got to deal with. We're learning as we go. The old cells, if you remember when you were in there, you can't see in them. You can't see through the windows. So for example, a lot of their safety information for cells for the whole facility, their safety, personnel safety information was based on a presumption. There's a door that goes from cell 2 to cell 3. It was based on a presumption that that door would be closed because the best information we had led us to think that that would have been closed before they just basically walked out of the facility and left it alone. When we got the window out of cell 3, we found out it's open. So it's not a big deal, but they've got to go back and revise and change some of the procedures to deal with that. So things like that crop up. Before SRNL can do their shots on the back side of these, they're called gel packs, but it's basically, there's a window and it's a plexiglass container, if you will, that's full of this gelatin kind of stuff. And they put it in there for shielding. Well, over the years, it's turned hard, settled, and yellow. You can't see through it. So you got to take it out. You can't fix it, you can't see through it, it's just got to be removed. So once they remove the window, then they have to remove this plastic thing full of the gelatin, and all that has to be done before SRNL can set up their equipment and do their shots. So that's basically what we have queued up to do this coming year. Any questions?
Another tab. So the manipulators, the arms, and the things that you take off, is that all stuff that goes out to WIP?
The manipulators on the inside, on the shift operating bay, that has always been maintained as a clean area. So I guess the answer is maybe. When the manipulators come down, they should be clean because, go to the cell 1 and 2 slide, if you could. Wow, this is good.
Last slide.
That's good enough. On the style of manipulators that are along here, this is sealed. So there's like a connection that they work through. So when you take the outers off, they should be just as clean as the rest of the building. Now, we have found some small amounts of contamination on them. So if they are contaminated, they may have to be shipped to WIP. It just depends on how contaminated they are and what it is.
Thank you.
clearly, all of the stuff that we haul out of the cells will have to go to WIP. Rose, do you have a question?
David? Thank you.
Hi, Randy.
Hey, Dave.
On slide number 4, first of all, let me apologize for being late. You may have covered this already, but on slide number 4 at the bottom, you say the facility and state will be determined through an agreement with state regulators. Can you elaborate on what the regulatory framework is for such an agreement? What regulations are in play there?
No. But I can figure that out and get back to you. I don't know offhand. I know that from talking to our environmental folks that there's more in this building than just puff. This is where the lion's share of the plutonium would be. I know that we've done some analysis, some fate and transport analysis, the SRNL has, that has looked into like 10,000 years from now when all of that stuff turns to dust, what would be left. I personally don't know the framework and how they would go through working through that with the state. But I can find that out and let you know.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Rose Hayes has a question. Rose, if you could come up to the microphone, please.
Hi, Randy. You mentioned that even though we do not know exactly how to quantify the material at this point, the plan is to take it down to a minimum area where it would be relatively safe for workers and the public. What is that level, and how are you going to measure that? And then the news on WIP keeps getting worse and worse, but we keep saying everything's going to go to WIP. Is there a backup plan?
I don't believe the department has anywhere else. I don't believe there are any other repositories that are currently basically authorized to accept that kind of waste. But
Well,
I'm
it
not-
can't
I'm not
author,
sure.
it doesn't accept anything now, it's closed.
But I believe the department's working on getting it reopened. I believe that's their plan.
It's been the plan for a long time. Now it's had a collapse,
WIP is,
so.
Well,
WIP is currently undergoing the contractor ORR as we speak, and the DOE ORR for restart will proceed at the end, in the next 1 or 2 months. I'm Jim Kekax. I'm the Nuclear Materials Engineering Division Director for Pat McGuire, and I've been tasked to be on the WIP ORR, and so we're scheduled to go to WIP either middle of November or December to do the DOE operational readiness review to start WIP back up, and it's expected to start up sometime in the beginning of calendar year 17.
Calendar year 17.
Yeah.
So the collapse in the last couple of weeks will not change that plan?
I've been no notice of any collapse that's occurred out there at WIP, and I've been in.
It's in the newspaper.
well,
And the newspaper's lying.
well, I may be
That might
speaking
be
out.
ground-
I may be.
Time out.
Ah,
Pat McGuire, DOE, we're not gonna make any comments on when WIP will reopen or not. They're on their schedule, and when WIP is ready to reopen, it will be reopened, and we're not gonna speculate on when that date is or anything of that nature. Okay, so you can ask whatever questions, but we're not gonna comment on the schedule for WIP. When it's ready, it'll be open, and then any waste that comes from Savannah Riverside will go into the appropriate queue that's dictated by headquarters of which waste will go to WIP, and we'll fall into that queue. Okay, so Rose, I appreciate, I understand your comments, but we're not gonna comment on the schedule for WIP. We're just not gonna do that.
but my other question was, aside from not commenting on the schedule for WIP, suppose WIP doesn't open, and that's happened over the last few years, the plans have not reached fruition. So what is Plan B?
We have no plan B. We are confident WIP will reopen whenever the appropriate time is.
Okay.
Okay.
So then, back to that first question, what is this lower level that's supposed to be safe for the public and the workers that you plan to take the material in 235F down to until we can actually quantify it?
Well, the objective, and then Jim can jump in here, correct me if I'm wrong, but when the DOE when the nuclear safety folks do their analysis, they strive to see and get the facility in a position where the projected dose is less than 100 millirem, so that you don't challenge 100 rem. So you don't, I believe the words they use is it doesn't challenge 100 rem. And that's why I had that statement on.
It doesn't challenge 100 rem?
Yes. We would want the calculated dose to be less than 100 rem. That's what we're working towards.
100 rem in an acute dosage or an annual?
No, it's a committed dose.
Permitted, acute.
Committed.
I'll be giving a
The way
presentation
plutonium works
on
is
the
it wouldn't
safety
really be an
analysis
acute
approach,
dose.
and I'll discuss a little bit about that approach and what it really means to say. And he's talking about the co-located worker, and 100 rem dose to the co-located worker would be a single dose, acute dose, but it's a postulated dose. It's not an actual dose. It's a dose used to describe and develop the potential accident scenario and identify the controls that we want to put in place to prevent or mitigate that should it occur.
So there is a PEL, a federal permitted exposure limit?
The federal regulation, and I'm going to be giving my presentation in a few minutes, gives guidelines on the doses that you use in your analysis to determine what controls you need to put in place to prevent or mitigate a potential accident. The dose that would actually occur on the day is not that dose. That's just the dose that's used in analysis to develop the control set to prevent or mitigate the dose. The actual dose on the day is going to have a lot of factors. The dose that you'll hear from me, that 100 rem, is an extremely conservative, no building exists. The material that we're talking about that's spread out throughout the facility is in a pile in one place. There's a seismic event. All that material catches on fire. All that material is distributed in the air, and all that material goes to the co-located worker standing 100 meters from the fence, and they stand there for 2 hours and inhale that. It is a conservative bounding approach to determine the control set, but not a expected dose to a person on that day. But I'm going to get into that a little bit better.
Thank you, Randy.
Any other questions from the panel or from the public?
Last call.
Thank you, Randall.
Sure.
Appreciate that very much. Okay.
Thank you. My name's James Keketz. As you heard, I am Pat's Engineering Division Director with the responsibility for ensuring that our nuclear facilities out there that are under his cognizance, whether it be SRNL or the other M&O facilities, do operate in accordance with the federal law, do make sure that we meet all federal commitments and requirements. So I'm going to go through just a simple explanation of how we do a very complex job. And hopefully I'll be able to convey what we're trying to accomplish. We can go to the next slide. As I stated, my briefing is going to be on the process we use to comply with the federal law. And what it does, it requires safe operation of those facilities. And we'll get into what it means by safe operation. And this was done at the request of the CAB. So that's why I'm here. I was told this slide's in every presentation, so there you go. Next slide. And if you work in the nuclear business, one thing you realize, and if you've had any experience with DOE, we love acronyms. So here's a list of acronyms. You can refer to them later. I'll try not to drift into acronym speak. I'll try to keep it to the actual words that we use. Next slide, please. Okay, so the law. The law is 10 CFR 830. That's the law that governs the operation of the DOE Department of Energy nuclear facilities. You can think of it as there's a federal law that ensures the safe operation of automobiles and transportation and make sure that you got to this meeting safely. Well, this is the law that makes sure that we operate the nuclear facilities safely. What it aims to do is ensure that the contractor responsible for the nuclear facility. They've got to analyze the work performed. They've got to determine what the associated hazards are. Then they've got to identify a control strategy and a control set to make sure that that facility is operated and ensures reasonable safety to the environment, the public, the co-located worker, and the facility worker. We do this, and we make sure that we comply with that law in every case. Sometimes with the legacy facilities, we don't have a lot of choices, but we do make sure that in every case we comply with the law. Next slide. From 10 CFR 830, that's the law, and then it points out how do you comply with the law. It has a subpart which tells you there's different ways that you can do the nuclear safety analysis and develop the control set. And for our facilities, we have all HAZCAT 2 and 3 facilities that are regulated under this. So we go to subpart A at table 2 and find the safe harbor. What that means is if you do it this way, then you've complied and met all the requirements to the CFR. There are other ways to do it. You can propose a different way, but if you do that, there's a mechanism to go through this federal law and get approval for a way that's different than what they call the safe harbor. We choose, and our contractor choose, to comply with the safe harbor because that lays out very specifically the processes we need to do to operate, build, construct, and operate and maintain these facilities. That's 3009, standard 3009. We'll go to the next slide and we'll talk about what 3009 does. 3009 requires that we develop a documented safety analysis, which is the what could go wrong and what we need to do to keep us safe. And I've talked earlier about controls, and those are the things we put in place to either prevent the accidents that we have determined are possible or potential, or mitigate the results of those accidents. And we'll go into what those words mean later. Another document that 3009 requires us to produce is the technical safety requirements. And you've heard in the paper where we've had violations of our technical safety requirements. The technical safety requirements are the instructions on how to ensure that everything we've done and developed in this documented safety analysis are in place, maintained, operable, reliable, and either prevent or mitigate the accident of concern should it happen. We operate HAZCAT 2 and 3 facilities. We don't have facilities like reactors that are on the edge of temperature going out of control or some monitored limit that could instigate the accident. Most of the accidents that we are concerned with are NPH accidents, fire caused by lightning or an earthquake. Those are the accidents that can affect you, the public. We do have accidents that can affect the co-located workers and the facility workers, and we are required to put controls in place for them also. But the primary objective of the federal regulation is to protect the public and the environment. Another document that you'll hear talk about is the authorization agreement. This is similar to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's license to operate. It's a vehicle we use to say that, okay, we've analyzed the scope of work you want to do, we've analyzed the hazards that are present, we've analyzed the accidents that are potential, and we've developed the control set for the work that DOE wants to be done in that nuclear facility. And then this says, okay, we've watched you do a readiness review, as we talked about an ORR at WIP, and then we say, all right, you've got the documented safety analysis, you have the facility with the controls in place, the procedures with the controls in place, now you're licensed to operate that facility because you're ready. Next slide, please. We're going to go a little deeper. 3009, and if I go too fast, please tell me to slow down. Welcome to that feedback. I tend to get going. 3009 in the process, as I've mentioned before, it's very structured. What it's going to do is it's going to have you describe the facility and the processes that are going to be operated or do operate in that facility. Then you look at the potential hazards that you have on hand, and obviously we have the nuclear material as the primary hazard, but we also have chemicals. So we have to look at their interaction and whether a chemical accident can instigate a nuclear release or vice versa. So we look at all the potential accidents, and we find out what are the most significant accidents that could happen and what are the related accidents can happen, so we can identify a control set that makes the best use of the taxpayers' monies to actually identify controls which will prevent or mitigate multiple accidents. So we develop the accident analysis, and what we're required to do there for the public is do consequence analysis. We talked about, I mentioned to Rose, that we take all the material, for instance, that's in HB line or H Canyon, we put it in a pile and we say, okay, if a seismic event happened and an earthquake happened and this burnt, what's the worst dose off-site, and that would be at 600 meters, that a person standing there for 2 hours unaware that they were inhaling the release could experience. And the federal regulation says if that dose challenges 25 rem, then we have to develop controls to prevent or mitigate that to a reasonable level below. Now it says reasonable. We have to determine what's reasonable. We've traditionally kept that for the development of a control set at the 1 to 5 rem level. What that requires is if we challenge that, we have to develop those controls and prevent or mitigate. When we develop controls, we have to select from a different structure of controls. It's called the hierarchy. So you can think of it, you're driving a car and the accident you want to prevent is crashing into another car. Okay, so you're going to be driving down I-20 doing 70 miles an hour. You want to go 70 miles an hour. You don't want to have a head-on collision with somebody coming in the other direction. The first level of control that's going to be on that highway, that's called the design feature, is the railings that separate the lanes so that you can't get over to the other lane to have a head-on collision. So in our hierarchy, the first level of control is to reduce, I'm going to diverge a little, is to reduce the material at risk, the amount of plutonium we're dealing with. But the next level is going to be a design feature, something like a wall that's permanently in place, that's always there. Now it can degrade over years, and we have to monitor it and make sure it's, if we think it's supposed to be 6 feet, that it maintains 6 feet all the time. And if it's structurally supposed to survive an earthquake, that it maintains its structural rigidity. But that wall's there. It doesn't have to do anything but be there. The next level of control is what we call an active control, an active engineered control. So nowadays in cars, you have the automatic system that brakes if you're approaching a car too fast. That's an active engineered control to prevent that accident from happening to you. We have equipment that'll shut valves if the temperature increases beyond a point to prevent overheating the vessel and causing an accident. That would be an active engineered control. We have a ventilation system that filters a release. That's an active engineered control. Okay? And then the next level of control is going to be, we can go to the next slide. The next level of control, we can go to the slide behind that, I've already talked about. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Is what we call a admin control, and that's where we get a person involved. And now what we'll try to do usually is find the design feature. If we can't find that, then we'll find the active engineered feature that'll help us. If we don't have that, we go to the default next level, which is an admin control. But we make it a specific admin control, which means the DSA relies on that person doing that activity as a protection that's credited in the DSA for preventing or mitigating the accident of concern. So an admin control would be the speed limit. You read the speed limit, you're required to stay below the speed limit. That's because some engineer has analyzed the curve that you're going around and says if you go around too fast, there's a potential of the car to roll over. So you're implementing an admin control when you obey the speed limit. The different accidents here, I'll get back to the slides because I'm wandering, that we typically get concerned with our nuclear facilities are our criticality, airborne material, as I've talked about, direct exposure from radiation. I talked about the walls as a design feature. Impact is something, you know, a truck running into something or a crane dropping something on a plutonium container, so we ensure that the containers that we design and use to store plutonium are sufficient to withstand whatever potential impact they could be exposed to. Fire, we have detection and suppression systems. These are typically controls that are SS for the workers on our facilities. We don't have very many safety class fire suppression systems because that becomes problematic in maintaining and operating. And then NPH, as we said, for the seismic, we're looking at the building design and construction to withstand the event.
NPH stands for?
NPH, I'm sorry, I did get to an acronym. NPH stands for a natural phenomenon or hazard. Okay, and as you'll see, safety class, when I talked about the controls that protect the public and the environment, we functionally classify them as safety class. And what that means is they're expected to have a higher reliability. Typically, we require redundancy. So if it's a diesel generator that provides power to operate the ventilation system, which filters the air in a seismic event so that there's not an offsite release, then there'll be 2 diesel generators required. And so that's safety class. Safety significant can either be defense in depth, which is another level of control for that event, which has the potential to impact the environment. So we do the safety class control with the 2 diesel generators, but then we might identify another safety significant control, which is a lower functional classification where you just might have to have one of the component. They still are controls that are maintained and monitored per those technical safety requirements that I spoke to earlier. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Here's where I talked about the admin controls that are identified by the DSA. We have many admin controls in these facilities because we operate verbatim per procedures. However, for certain events, we get to the point where we don't have engineered or design features or active controls, so we'll have an specific admin control, which is, you know, we might tell an operator that you can only have one of these cans in the glove box at any time. And so that'd be a specific admin control, or you can only have 50 pounds of combustible material in a room. As you see here, they talk about speed operation. So other than specific admin controls, we have something called SMPs. Now, you've heard of Radiological Protection Program. I would assume that would be an SMP. That's a program that's in place that assures reasonable safety to the workers and the co-located workers by the nature of the way we do our business from a radiological standpoint. The PPE we wear, the alarm that monitors for releases in the facility. So we have other programs that we credit. The structural integrity program would be a program that, as I said, there's design features. We know they're there, but we want to, within some periodicity, inspect and ensure that they're not degrading to the point where they no longer provide the function that we rely on. So, and then we have emergency response, which would also be a safety management program that's in place in the event of a release to get the workers out of the plume, move them to a safe area. Because again, the analysis is done bounding, like I said, 2 hours, the person standing there. sometimes I have to remind people, even the people that work with me, that the analysis we do for documented safety analysis is solely so that we can identify the controls that we want to put in place to make sure that we operate safely. After that occurs, if we have that accident, that's not the dose that we expect the person to get. I wouldn't expect, and then we have programs, I would not expect someone to stand outside a fence for 2 hours if the site was having a seismic event which affected the nuclear facilities. And I don't think anybody here would expect that to happen. So I like to bring that up because we get wrapped up when we see 25 rem or 100 rem to the co-located worker. Oh, they're saying that person's going to get that. No, we're saying if we took this conservative bounding approach and they stood there per the guidelines that drive us to identify controls, we need controls. So we identify them and we put them in place. Okay, next slide. The bottom line is, you've heard this before, that safety is the #1 priority. I live in Aiken. I've lived here for 21 years, and I go home at night and I sleep well because I know that the people that DOE employs at Savannah River site, the people that work for me, the contractor is responsible for developing these documents. My staff is responsible for reviewing and evaluating and approving and then assessing continuously their performance for maintaining the facilities in accordance with these controls that we identify. In addition to that, as was mentioned before, we have the Defense Nuclear Safety Board, which does their own independent reviews of the safety analysis documents that we develop and the control sets that we identify and the process that we use to maintain those controls. And then in addition to that, the Department of Energy has an organization, EA31, which does another set of independent reviews of my staff's ability to perform their oversight of the contractor, as well as the documents that are developed by the contractor. We open ourselves up to a lot of inspection and assessment to make sure that we are meeting the requirements of 10 CFR and most importantly, that we are ensuring the safety of the public, the environment, and the workers. So I went through that pretty fast, and it can be pretty confusing. So if I left anybody on the curb, feel free to ask me some questions. Dawn. I don't believe that you don't understand all that, but go ahead.
Dawn Gillis, Cab. No, I want to go one step further.
Change were appropriately changed. There are some changes that can be made to the documented safety analysis that are editorial or clear, cannot be changed. A word DOE approved you to operate. They are not allowed to change the TSRs without sending it back through DOE for review and approval. But typically, like in L area, to change just a receipt of a type of fuel, it doesn't take a DSA change. It takes some documentation that's supported through the programs they have in place, and we talked about the SMPs, to make sure that that fuel is bounded by the other fuel we've analyzed for, and there's no accidents of a different nature than what we've already analyzed. But if we do a mission change, like when we did oxide production in B-line, that was almost a 2-year effort from the start to approval and implementation. I'd say that was, and we're doing right now a major upgrade on the Savannah River lab. Right.
Fuels, how long be once we've got these 1,000, pretty close? How long will it take to get once? And I'm assuming the record of decision and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking just from a safety basis standpoint.
Right now, I would say I don't expect a DSA revision needed to be required for those. I think the USQ will say that these fuels are bounded by previous fuels that we've received.
Okay.
But that's
your gut feeling right now, based on your experience.
From my experience, I don't expect a DSA change to be required for fuel receipts into
Not fuel receipts. I'm talking about processing. Sorry.
Oh, for
I missed it,
processing
for processing
in
through
H
the canyon.
Canyon?
Yeah.
Again, I don't exceed, I would say the same thing, that for processing aluminum fuel in the dissolvers, I think we're pretty well have the accident set covered.
As long as they can fit in the current dissolver and that kind of thing.
Right. Well, I mean, they may do, and what they can do is they can do it, again, the USQ, they can do an NCSE, which now I'm getting into nuclear criticality safety evaluation, which if they have the controls, they won't have to change the DSA. So
That's where your metric ton heavy metal thing comes in. We're going to talk about it a little bit later. But
any other questions?
Thank you.
I thought I saw one.
Dan Kaminsky, cab. Since being on the cab, I've taken note of some very minor incidents, and I know there were no criticality issues.
Right.
There was a stirring mechanism that failed. There was a ventilation system in one of the dryers that failed. There was some valves that were corroded prematurely, and waste went into the wrong tank, things of that nature. And so some things that we learn in industry, we do something similar to what you're talking about here today. It's called a failure mode.
Yeah, we're
effects
required to do
analysis.
failure mode evaluations for systems.
So the question and concern I have with that is, if we're doing those, I'm assuming you'd have FMEAs or an equivalent document on all these different subsystems and processes. During our safety stand down this last year would have been a great opportunity. I don't know if it was captured, but how often are these being reviewed? Because it seems in a couple of those instances,
Actually,
failures
if you look
occurred
at
and weren't
3009 and the graded approach, we're not required to do failure modes analysis because of the HAZCAT 2 facilities not being operating reactors, not greater than 25 megawatt reactors. We have a graded approach, so we don't always have those. We're not required to have them. Okay.
But
we
the
do,
process you're talking about is quite similar to that, correct?
right. But what we do is when we have those events, we do causal analysis and we do extent of condition reviews on the systems. But the criticality one, I'm aware of the stirring device, and that was I mean, we did a full root cause analysis of that and determined the corrective actions, and it really, that wasn't an equipment. There was a common mode failure that was missed by the crit engineers, but it really went more to picking an admin control and not ensuring that the operators could effectively understand whether they had successfully implemented the admin control there. The other ones I think might have been at the waste organization, which I don't have responsibility for.
I wasn't saying it's all on your table either.
No, I'm
It's just some observations, and then beyond that, obviously this would also go on the safety and the well-trained and qualified personnel. Has these types of studies and analysis put forth what happens if an operator in a critical function of the process becomes drowsy and ineffective? What are we doing to catch that?
Well, to catch that, I mean, we have our facility reps and conduct of ops oversight. But as far as the safety analysis goes, we would already assume that an operator fails pretty regularly in our analysis. So,
So there's redundancies or someone watching another?
Yeah, I mean,
something?
we have, like, for criticality, that's why you'll hear that when we had events in criticality where we were well away from any significant risk of the criticality, but we violated some controls that we had identified because we identify numerous sets of controls so that we have layers of defense so that if one fails that we haven't moved, significantly close to the accident of concern.
Okay. Just follow up, Pat Barr with DOE. Two things came to mind when you talked about drowsiness and things of that nature. One, there's a limit on how many hours people can work. And so we're very sensitive to that. People do work long hours, but there's a limit on the number of hours. Also, for critical applications, we have independent verification. So if you're required to go check this valve and you may be sleepy, we're required, Harold's going to come independent of you. You're done. He's going to come in, not even know where the valve is. He's going to find it himself, make sure it's properly positioned. So even if you were drowsy and you didn't do your job for those key critical steps, we have independent verifications that will have someone separate come and check your work to make sure it's done properly and efficiently.
Yeah, and some of that, the reason I brought up the drowsiness is Jenny has expressed some concern about those shift hours. And they're, in some cases, I believe they're even longer than a truck driver is allowed to be on the road. So when we're dealing with nuclear materials and sensitive processes, it has raised some concerns with us that we're doing our due diligence. So actually that was just kind of working into what you are doing with regards to analyzing that risk, and then what we can do further to maybe offer a suggestion from the board to further mitigate that.
I would say one thing we do is, as I said, first of all, we go to the hierarchy. We try very, very hard not to rely on specific admin controls. Specific admin controls are controls where an operator is relied on for a protection in the safety basis. When we do have those, as Pat said, we do the second person verification, and in the field of area of criticality, we have some opportunities to, and they're looking at it, to do more realistic analysis that will remove our reliability on operators to be the last line of defense for admin controls. So we try to move away from those as much as we can, and if we can make progress anywhere, it's finding really to find the funds to implement engineered controls over admin controls. But again, in criticality, there's a double contingency principle. It requires 2 independent controls. We go beyond that. We identify several controls that allows us to have the confidence that, and we don't see typically a high number of failures on admin controls, specific admin controls that are relied upon by the safety basis. We did have a couple in the area of criticality during the pause. Because we do have admin controls in the criticality area, when the conduct of ops did dip below what we have our expectations for from a nuclear facility operation, it did show up in the criticality area. But in every case, because of the way we do our bounding analysis, the concentration of plutonium in the vessel is maintained very low. Poison, which would be a control that's added to the vessel, is ensured to be beyond a certain point, so that even if the concentration went out of control, there would still be enough poison. And then at the end of the day, we also say, okay, neither one of those work. We've got several steps of admin controls in the upfront processing and beeline to ensure we don't do something wrong. Well, when we fail 1 or 2 of those controls, we have a very, I'd say, healthy safety work conscious. We identify it. We try to make sure that never happens. But in the suite of controls, we've always been well away from losing a significant number of controls that would have moved what I would say is the margin of safety beyond incrementally.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Any questions from the public? Yes. Could you step up to the microphone?
Sorry?
Step up to the microphone.
Usually I don't need one, but I'll try.
A familiar face.
I applaud the contractor and DOE for taking on this job for risk reduction. So that's good. In this type of facility, the technical basis is usually very weak. Prints aren't really up to date because they've been around for a long time, and the technical manuals usually aren't up to date. And the experience level of the workers, managers, builders, is almost non-existent. This type of facility, the trick is managing the unknown unknowns. How do you plan on doing that? Not a trick question.
Well, first of all...
Sorry, Pat.
First of all, from a DSA perspective, you would know that we have controls to protect the environment down there, and we have controls for the co-located worker. When we get to the facility level controls, that's where we need to try to manage the unknown. And as you heard Randy say, we're taking a very cautious approach. We're making sure that we ensure that the cells are well lit, that they're characterized and well understood. We do have the crews that are familiar with working with high hazard plutonium removal that worked during the TRUE campaign. So they are experienced with dealing with the unknown, you know, the, whatever you said. I can't say it so eloquently. But I'll let Pat move on from that.
Okay, Pat, give it a try.
Yeah.
So this is Pat McGuire with DOE. Excellent question, because you can't predict everything. I mean, and there's things you think you know and you don't know, so the unknown unknowns. So as Jim said, we're very, very conservative in the analysis, okay? So by putting a lot of conservatism in the analysis will help mitigate some of those things we think we know that we don't. And here's an example. And Jim will correct me when I'm wrong, okay? So you have a tank, okay? And let's say there's a potential for a hydrogen explosion in this tank. And so you have to say, okay, how much material is in the tank, and how much of it does deflagrate, explode, how much is going to go airborne, and that's based on how much hydrogen could be generated in this tank. And so very conservatively we say, well, we're going to fill the contents of the tank 100% full. Can't get much more than 100%. Then you go, okay, for the biggest energetic release, you want as much hydrogen in there as you can. So you're going to assume it's all filled with hydrogen. And you're going to put those two together, and the resulting consequences will be what the analysis assumes. Now, obviously, those can't occur simultaneously. We don't know how much is going to be in the tank, or it can't be more than 100% full of material. It can't be more than 100% full of hydrogen. And an operational limit will actually be somewhere in between. But from an unknown, well, it doesn't really matter. It's extreme on both conditions, and so that conservatism kind of gives us the basis to say that will cover some of the unknowns that may be out there. So that's one example of how conservative the analysis is, and that, as Jim said on the day of the event, we know it's going to be somewhat less than that. Okay, and then we'll respond appropriately. So that's how we address the unknown unknowns due to the conservatism in the analysis, not just on quantity and contents. You know, there's
Site pick.
there's a hurricane out there. Alert! Excuse me. Okay.
That was perfectly timed, wasn't it?
So I think that's how we address the unknown unknowns.
We're all on the arrow.
Through the conservatism.
Most D&D projects stumble on that in the field because they stumble into these areas and the workers charge ahead because they want to get the job done, and bad things happen. So my recommendation would be, as part of your training and pre-job briefs down to the fundamentals, is ensure that the workers don't touch anything that they're not positively sure that they know what it is in their haste to get the job done correctly.
A very good point. And one of the things we stress at the pre-job briefings, before I open this valve, before I turn this switch, what is the worst thing that can go wrong? So we anticipate the unanticipatable, right? Same thing. So what could go wrong if it doesn't, what I expect to occur doesn't occur? So they stress those questioning attitudes, be a peer checker. And again, I agree with you. A lot of people have the mentality, I want to get this job done, right? They're very proud of the work that they're doing. They want to do a good job. And unfortunately, there are some instances where people forget maybe some of the training or the understanding what those unknowns are, and they may be thinking they're doing a good job and they're getting in some analyzed space. And so, but your points are very well taken.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
It looks like we do.
Thank you. Tom Clements, Savannah Riverside Watch. We're aware that plutonium is now being processed in a couple of facilities, and this was kind of touched on. There was the incident where there was workers ignoring the regulations in HB line and handling the containers, which was not malicious in nature. And though this would be an outlier type situation, how do you account for either malicious actions by operators or some kind of external type, you know, an attack in the extreme? How was that built into, you know, safety analysis?
Okay. Well,
Thank you.
from the extreme external malicious attack, say from, you know, terrorists, yes. You know, the facility, because of the material it handles, has a security force in place to combat that. The documented safety analysis by federal regulation does not deal with those kinds of threats. It's not required by federal law for us to do an analysis of the potential of somebody to bomb the facility. That's a security issue, and it's handled outside of the documented safety analysis. For the malicious worker event, as Pat said, where we rely on workers to implement a control that is significant enough for it to be a specific admin control, which is a control that's relied on by the safety basis. There's peer verification, independent peer verification. In this case, we did have people go along, even though one person seemed to be the instigator in the event that you're talking about, and the first line manager failed his job. So in that case, the peer verification failed. But as I said before, that one control failed. We have several controls in place that ensure the safety of the operation. So it would be difficult for one malicious person to affect an event that is of a DSA level event because of the hierarchy I talked about in the bounding analysis and the fact that we are not operating a reactor. If you were an operating reactor and you could get a temperature, go out of control, out to a runaway point, the events that we have, the criticalities are probably the ones that I would say that, I don't even know what I was going to say there, but we put a lot of admin controls in criticality space, but we put a lot of conservatism in what's a credible criticality scenario. Our analysis, when people look at them, they say there's no way that could possibly happen, and we say we don't care if there's no way. We are going to ensure that we protect it can happen. If any criticism we've received in criticality is that we're supposed to identify controls for credible criticality scenarios, and the credibleness of our scenarios gets challenged at times, but we'd rather err on the conservative side, as Pat said. So really, it goes back to identifying the hierarchy of controls, defense in depth, and relying on more than just that one admin control that somebody could override by intent. All right, thank you.
I did, I'm sorry, I was going to wait and be the last one. So,
Okay.
Because this is sort of trivial, I think. My name's Laura Lance, I'm from Aiken. Just as a member of the general public, these drones that keep flying over, and I know this probably seems kind of trivial, but you would think a sensitive facility that there wouldn't be these mysterious drones flying over and nobody knows where they come from and all this. What is that about, and why isn't there like a system in place, or could that even potentially be a matter of concern?
That's above my pay grade.
So Pat McGuire with DOE. We've had a couple conversations about drones in the past. And so let me just say we haven't had any drone issues for quite a while. And so
I think there was
Just had one.
like just last week.
We had a satellite security alert, but it was confirmed not to be a UAS.
From the public viewpoint, it's like sort of concerning and silly at the same time. And it's
Understand.
like, what's that about?
This is one of the areas where Federal Aviation Act has rules and requirements. And we discussed this before about the sensitivity of obviously a nuclear installation. You want to protect and make sure things are going to be safe. And drones can be used to gather information, to plan things like that. And so we're working within all the federal laws that we can to address those situations. Okay. Some of you may think, let's just shoot them down. Okay. Well, Unfortunately, we're not able to take those measures at this time. You may think, well, why not? Well, you know, we have laws we have to follow, and people have rights, whether you may agree with them or not, whether they can fly over various areas. We have to work through the laws just like you as public citizens have to do. So we're doing that to our best ability, working with the Federal Aviation Administration to work through to see what we can do. And that's, I wish I had a better answer for you, but we're doing the best we can, following the laws. That's all I can say.
Is there not, I mean, I'm just curious, do I need to go back over there?
Yeah, go to the White
Well,
House. That's where they.
Is there not some sort of like surveillance system that would have even gotten pictures of them? I mean, it's like somebody said they saw drones, and then, but there's never been like, oh, here's somebody got a picture of this. And it seemed like there would be cameras everywhere that would have pictures of things. And
The site is 300 square miles. I mean, it's as big as the Beltway around Atlanta.
Yeah.
It's huge.
So
these
these
drones, as you can imagine, will fly in. 2 minutes later, they're going to fly out. Okay, so to actually get a picture, by the time you see it and you go get a camera, people have their cell, by the time you look, it's gone.
Okay.
So and if it's teenagers doing this, well, you know, teenagers being teenagers. If it's something more serious, that's why we're trying to manage that. So by the time you see them get a picture, they're gone. It happens that quick. It's not like they're flying over for hours.
and so there aren't like cameras that would like see things as they enter the perimeter. I mean, that's just too big of an area to even do that. They just.
I can tell you what I told you. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. We are now at a point to our committee discussion, and we have a draft recommendation that Don and David have put together. And David, if you would go over this recommendation, please.
Thank you, Larry. David Hoyle, CAB. You know, we've gotten some briefings in the recent past from Maxine Maxted and Alan Gunther concerning spent fuel management and operation of H Canyon. And as a result of those briefings and discussions, I opined at a previous committee meeting that it would be a good idea for Don and I to put together a recommendation along these lines. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to just walk us through this for people who either are listening in on the phone or don't have a copy in front of them. First, the background. Aluminum-clad spent nuclear fuel was used in DOE's now retired production reactors to produce nuclear materials for the nation's nuclear weapons program, as well as in research reactors. Unlike stainless steel or zirconium-clad spent nuclear fuel, aluminum-clad spent fuel is intentionally designed with aluminum cladding to make it easier to be chemically dissolved and processed through the separations facilities known as F and H canyons at SRS. Aluminum-clad spent nuclear fuel is significantly less robust, susceptible to corrosion, and was always intended to be processed, not stored for a long time. As SRS's F canyon has been deactivated, and H canyon is the only remaining operational hardened nuclear chemical separations facility in the United States capable of large-scale nuclear materials processing. I guess that's a sentence without an ending. Owing to the end of the Cold War and subsequent budget insufficiencies, a large backlog of aluminum-clad spent nuclear fuel remains in aging storage basins at SRS, with some spent fuel dating back to the 1950s. DOE aluminum-clad spent nuclear fuel is also stored at other DOE sites. Approximately 22 metric tons of heavy metal of spent nuclear fuel are currently stored in SRS's L Basin. DOE expects to continue to receive spent nuclear fuel from other sites and research reactors through 2035 for storage at SRS. Congress required that the department continue H Canyon operations, maintain a high state of readiness, and provide the associated necessary technical staff. Currently, H Canyon is processing 1,000 bundles and up to 200 cores of aluminum-clad spent fuel, approximately 3.3 metric tons, in accordance with an amended record of decision. The recovered enriched uranium is then downblended into low-enriched uranium for eventual use in commercial power reactors. This processing campaign is projected to be completed by 2024, and DOE has not decided whether to process the balance of its aluminum-clad spent nuclear fuel inventory, wanting to first see how the current campaign goes before committing to additional processing. Now, this is my discussion portion. As it is quite similar to decades of previous operations, it's unlikely that the current SNF processing campaign will yield much, if any, new information about H Canyon's capabilities. The reluctance of DOE to commit to a holistic and long-term strategy to work off its existing aluminum-clad spent nuclear fuel is more likely linked to competing budget priorities. A recent DOE Inspector General audit is also critical of DOE's lack of a long-term strategy for operation of H Canyon. In the interim, DOE is investigating the possibility of indefinitely storing the aluminum-clad spent nuclear fuel in dry storage technologies. Long-term storage of aluminum-clad spent nuclear fuel, especially in dry storage, seems unnecessarily risky in comparison to the intended disposition path of processing. Further, as H Canyon is now well over 50 years old and very expensive to maintain, DOE should take full advantage of this unique processing capability while it still exists and accelerate processing of the entire existing inventory of aluminum-clad spent nuclear fuel. Therefore, I'm proposing that the SRS Citizens Advisory Board recommend that DOE accelerate plans and decisions to process its entire inventory of aluminum-clad spent nuclear fuel as soon as possible through H Canyon. Now, I had asked the support team to give me a rundown of previous recommendations by the CAB concerning spent nuclear fuel, H Canyon, and topics of that sort. They came up with, I don't know, about 7 or 8 CAB recommendations that had those terms in them. And I researched each of those recommendations to find out which might be relevant to this particular recommendation that I'm proposing today. And you see the 3 that are listed there. Most pertinent of which is the last one, number 295, which was passed by the CAB in 2012, and the title was Implementation of Spent Nuclear Fuel Exchange Program with Idaho. There is some spent fuel still stored at Idaho. The CAB recommended in that recommendation that DOE re-examine the advantage of having all spent nuclear fuel processed at SRS and not held for extended storage at SRS, very similar to this recommendation. DOE simply responded at the time that a decision had not yet been made at that time. And since then, of course, they have made a decision, that amended record of decision, to process 1,000 bundles and 200 cores, but that's not all of the inventory. So I welcome any discussion.
Dave, quick question. Would it result in additional waste being stored here, or are you still talking about some sort of exchange program?
Well, 2 things. Yes, processing would result in additional waste going to the high-level waste tanks. In terms of the other part, Idaho does have some aluminum-clad fuel that's intended to come to Savannah River site and swapped with, I believe, some stainless or zirconium-clad fuel that is in storage here at SRS. DOE hasn't done that yet, but eventually I hope they will, because I think that aluminum-clad fuel should be processed as well here.
Yeah, Don Gillis, CAB. First of all, I want to say that Dave did all the work. He'd mentioned,
thank you, Dave.
Yeah, he'd mentioned it earlier. And I thought it was a great idea, and I think he did a great job, but he put my name on it, and he did all the work. But as far as leaving behind, yes, if all the aluminum fuel comes out, there's still the non-aluminum, the zirconium and stainless steel fuel, which is a lot of the older stuff that still has to have a way to get out of here. And that's what the Idaho program was expected to do. So what I see is a follow-on to this recommendation to take that next step of going back and looking again at the Idaho exchange, or coming up with some other options besides taking it out and putting it into dry storage. Dry storage is just another form of storage on the site. It is not a disposition pad.
Right.
So, and that's one of the big
Yeah,
deals here, and it just keeps it as a fuel and keeps it as a disposition.
And I just want to stress that it wasn't so much that it's like in a disagreement on my point. I think we should use the asset while it's still viable. The concern would be the roadblock that we'd likely see from the state or DHEC or someone else just bringing more and more waste here without an exit path. That's been our panel, our advisory board's biggest concern, is there's no exit path for anything coming here. And I would certainly support a whole exchange program so that we're utilizing this resource while it is still functioning, and have a win-win in a sense that we're getting it into a more stable form.
Yeah, that was definitely the point. The whole point of the Idaho was to have a way to get our non-aluminum fuels out of here, and the cost of that would be to take their aluminum fuels in that we can process. So,
Is the rough tonnage about the same between these?
I don't remember all those numbers.
I
The
don't know
aluminum
the
fuel is a lot
tonnage
less.
in Idaho, but it's
Yeah.
substantially less than what's currently in inventory here at Savannah Riverside.
Aluminum fuel weighs a lot less than the stainless steel fuel does, and I don't remember all those numbers. I used to know all those numbers.
Yeah, I don't know if you'd go by weight anyway as much as you'd get rid of curies, right?
Well, it's actually bundles. It's not even curies so much as it's how many bundles you send. So in fuel elements and that type of thing, it's how many bundles that come out. Or actually, I think it's how many casks. Where's Maxie? Yeah, it's how many casks is actually is what it was. But go ahead.
So Pat McGuire with DOE. So you're all right.
Little bits and
Okay.
pieces.
Mass is important. Number of fuel elements is important, and so it depends upon what perspective you like to look at. So as David said, obviously stainless steel and zirc fuel weighs more, and so if we give that to Idaho, they're going to get more mass, more weight. In exchange, we're going to get more bundles. Okay, so depending upon how you look at it, it's probably advantageous to both states. They get rid of things that right now they don't have a disposition path for, and we likewise get things that we don't have a disposition path for. So whether you look at mass or numbers of bundles or however you want to slice and dice the information, it'll provide a pathway out for us to de-inventory L Basin, which is our ultimate goal, to get all that fuel out, shut that facility down, and so all the material is gone. So however you want to look at it, mass, bundles, whatever, it can work out to our advantage.
Susan?
Susan Corbett, CAB. So I have a couple of questions. What is Idaho going to do with the zirconium fuel?
They put it in. They have a form to put it into dry storage.
So they're just putting it. Are they getting it ready for the permanent repository? Or is it just?
Yeah, that's their point. Is they're going to take that stuff and direct ship it to whatever repository when the time comes.
So they're going to put it in the kind of canister that would have gone into Yucca Mountain or something like
Well,
that.
I don't think they're actually. Yeah, here's Maxine.
Max at DOE. They're actually putting it in the dry storage temporarily. They think they'll have to do some other repackaging when the federal repository is open. So it'll be repackaged when the federal repository is open.
Because if you think about it, casks only have a certain lifetime, and they have to be recertified every so often. So if you're going to store it in that cask, and it's stored in that cask for 20 years, they're going to have to take it out of that cask anyway, because that cask would have to be recertified and may not be able to go on the road. So they put it in these things, and then they have to package them to whatever requirements are at the time, and whatever the repository is going to require.
Right. So why is there a backlog? And you talked about competing budgets. Is it not all the same budget? How is that? Why do we still have stuff here from 1950? You would think that you would take the oldest stuff first and deal with that. Why do we have this backlog?
So some of our material, a small portion, like less than 10% of the inventory is the stainless and Zerk. That's some of the older material. That's not processable through H Canyon in its current configuration. Basically, our tanks are made out of stainless, so we can't dissolve our tanks because we couldn't then
I understand
process.
that, but it says here that a large backlog of aluminum clad remains in aging storage.
We do. The processing basically was in a hiatus for a couple of years, and then we started back in 2013 with the SRE campaign for the sodium reactor experiment fuel. So there was a time period when there was no processing, and so that backlog occurred during that time period.
So what are these competing budgets that you're alluding to, David? I mean, you seem to think that...
Everything on site, yeah.
I mean,
So-
the U.S. federal government's budget is limited across the way.
And other sites too.
Larry?
Okay.
I think Mary had a question.
Mary Weber Cab, thank you both for your work on this, even though you deny working on it. I think it's a very timely recommendation, especially given the IG inspector report that I just read about this week, that I only read about in the newspaper and haven't had a chance to look at myself. So I agree with the recommendation. I think it's very good. My specific questions about bundles and tonnage have kind of been answered, and I know maybe I wasn't paying enough attention to Maxine's presentation at the last meeting, but I do understand that now. But I also think that it might be worth this committee revisiting 266 and 295 at some point in the future.
Thank you, Mary.
That's it.
Nina?
Check my pen. Thank you, Don and David, for writing this really obviously well-researched recommendation. I did have one question. Under discussion, the first two sentences, it almost sounds like those are more opinion-based, and it kind of takes away some of the strength, I think, of the recommendation. Almost as if you would start discussion with a recent DOE inspector rather than the first two.
I respectfully disagree with that, because it's exactly the point. The point is that this canyon has been run for decades to do this material. The material that we're running now is exactly what the canyon was designed to do, and continuing to do this and to think that we're going to get any new information out of it is not what's going to happen. I think that is, I read that statement, I went, yes, that's kind of the point.
No, I get that, and I get that's the point. But it just, when you read it, it comes as more likely linked to competing budget priorities. So it comes off as an opinion rather than if we had something that says this part is being cut to finance something else. Otherwise, it comes off as opinion-based.
It is opinion.
It is opinion, and that's what I'm saying. I think when you have those first two sentences, everything else you have in background and discussion is very fact-based.
Mm-hmm. That's why it was moved to discussion,
yes,
not
and
background.
But I think, I mean, this is just for me personally, I feel like you're taking a lot of what you have away by those two sentences.
That's
Just
I
me.
don't agree with that.
I don't agree either.
Understand your point, but I don't agree.
Jenny?
Okay, and I join everybody else in thanking you for writing this, focusing on the recommendation sentence and focusing on the phrase as soon as possible. CAB recommends that we accelerate plans as soon as possible. Do you want to put an additional phrase in there with a time limit? For example, as soon as possible and before 2020, 2025. I mean, they can always say no, but I worry about the government interpreting as soon as possible as, oh yeah, we'll do it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
You know, 50 years from now, 100. So what would you think about
Well,
delineating
I
a
don't really
time?
have any basis for a specific year. Otherwise, I'd do it. I just don't have a basis for it. And I think the message that we're trying to convey here to DOE is get off your butt and process this aluminum clad fuel as soon as possible. And I don't think I need to define a specific date, because I have no basis for a specific date. Now, having said that, you know, there have been plans in the past to decommission H Canyon as soon as 2019. I don't think that's true anymore, fortunately, but certainly soon.
Yeah, it would be very difficult to, I mean, when you see that, and the statement earlier says they're gonna be receiving it through 2035. So.
Yeah, that doesn't mean they're operating till 2035.
That doesn't mean the canyon's gonna operate, that means the basin's gonna operate through 2035. That doesn't mean the canyon's gonna operate through then.
At most, we have a commitment or a decision, at least by DOE, that they're gonna process 1,000 bundles and 200 cores through 2024. So that's an indication that it'll at least operate until 2024. But if I said process the whole inventory by 2024, I know that's not possible. They just can't operate that fast.
But I do think that the Accelerate plans, to do 1,000 bundles in 8 years, you know, look at that to see if that's where the Accelerate plans comes in. And because if you think that's only, you know, the 3,500 bundles, is that about plus or minus what's in there now?
Yeah, that's right.
So that's less than a third of those. Then and plus whatever else of the hypercores are going to come in after the 200. So if it's going to take us 8 years to do 1,000 and 200, if you just linearly put that out, you know, we're talking, what, 2050? I hadn't done the math, but it's a long time if we're going to keep it at that rate. So that rate needs to, that's the Accelerate plans part of it.
Any other comments?
Can the public ask?
Sure.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. Tom Clements.
Tom Clements, Savannah Riverside Watch. I have a concern about several things in here, but my main concern is you mentioned the Inspector General report on H Canyon. I wish I had it here with me. It did say that there was lack of planning and kind of haphazard what's being processed and stuff, but it also did say there was lack of maintenance on the facility. I don't think it addressed, you know, what the need would be to upgrade it to make it safer. So your recommendation here really totally ignores that the Inspector General has just raised their potentially safety questions based on aging infrastructure in that facility. And there may be a reason to go slow with what's being processed to see the status of the facility itself. But here you say, do the whole entire inventory. We don't even know if there's going to be any budget to upgrade the facility, you know, at what pace or whatever over time. You totally ignore that. And as a member of the public, that worries me greatly that you haven't addressed that potentially there could be some safety considerations with that facility because it's 60 years old. That's my main concern about the recommendation. And I mean, I realize there's political and financial drivers behind continuing to operate H Canyon, in addition possibly to some technical reasons to do that or for storage of the fuel. But I think it would be helpful if Maxine, and she may be the right one, would address what DOE is doing to look at the spent fuel at Hanford, at Idaho, which are various research types of fuel, naval fuel, and the material here being of different kinds, what DOE is doing holistically, because what we've got is a situation where Savannah Riverside is doing one thing, the other sites are doing something else, and I know Savannah Riverside has not wanted to pursue dry cask storage of this material, but it's happening at the other sites. I don't think your recommendation presents argumentation that it can't be done safely with the aluminum clad fuel, which was designed to be reprocessed. And that was an idea, 20 years ago to dry cask store that stuff, but it hasn't proceeded. But my main point is, how are you addressing the safety of this facility here? You're going full speed ahead with an old facility. And I think potentially that could make the cab look bad as they've ignored safety risks with this 60-year-old facility. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Dan Kaminsky, Cab. Safety is paramount, and I appreciate the comment, Tom. And I don't honestly feel that you've totally ignored safety here as much as it's implied within processes and decisions. So I think maybe to balance his statement versus what's in the recommendation, that the word safely be inserted, and within safe parameters, I'll maybe do a little.
First of all, I have
Little
no,
wordsmithing.
I have no belief DOE would accelerate their plans unsafely, okay?
I as well.
That's
Especially after
implicit
hearing
in
key
this
caps
recommendation.
today, so.
I'm not trying to solve all of DOE's problems in this one recommendation. I'm just trying to get across, and I'm hoping the CAB will also try and get across that we want DOE to accelerate spent fuel storage. And,
Fuel processing.
excuse me, processing, not storage. Boy. And I don't expect them to do it any way else than safe. I don't need to put safe in everything.
Any other comments?
I just wanted to ask a quick question.
Sure.
This is just, Laura Lance Aiken. I just, you say long-term storage of aluminum clad SNF, especially in dry storage, seems unnecessarily risky in comparison to the intended disposition. I'm just wondering, what are the risks? Just for general information, what unnecessarily
Well,
risky? What? Yeah.
I'm not the expert on aluminum
somebody.
fuel, but
Oh, thanks.
Maxine Maxted, DOE. So some of the issues that we have with dry storage of aluminum clad in cask is you've got to put it in a welded sealed container. And with aluminum, it hides the water. And over time, that water, the hydrogen will break down and can become a gas. And you could have a pressurized container, which nobody wants. You could also accelerate production of hydrides, which would then actually attack the fuel and make it degrade faster than normal. So you'd end up with a sludge in the bottom. And depending on the criticality analysis, you've got to make sure you don't go critical when that stuff turns into a sludge. Just like Kikex was saying, it could be a ball in the bottom. They have to do the analysis for that, but we have to protect it so it doesn't get into that ball in the bottom. So it's that type of thing that we have to guard against.
Is there like a known lifespan for things that are stored in aluminum, or a predicted lifespan?
We're learning it. We actually have coupons in our basin, which are little samples of the aluminum, and they've been put into the basin for different periods of time. We take it out, they'll go and do all kinds of testing on it to see how fast it is corroding. But that's under a water condition. We don't have that same information under a dry condition. And then Tom had asked about what's going on from a complex wide for dry storage, and why do some sites do it and some don't. So we do have a working group that's established that includes nuclear energy from Idaho, includes the Office of Science from Oak Ridge, and it includes the EM sites. And the reason that it's different at each site is their fuel is different. So at Idaho, at Hanford, they had one fuel type. They've dealt with that one fuel type. It was easy, goes in one container, they can handle it. Not easy, but they were able to fix it. Idaho has a couple, but most of it is standard radiation, standard size, standard material inside of it, standard uranium content. So they're able to look at that and put it into a condition where they can put it in a dry canister. At L area, as you've seen the pictures, I have every shape and size. Some of them are tower shield reactors, which is like a pie shape. We've seen the Hyfer's in a circle. We have the sticks, you know, the rectangular squares. To put that into dry storage, I've got to have different systems for each one of those fuels. And each one of those fuels has a different uranium content, different makeup. It could be an oxide, it could be a plate, metal. All of that has to go into consideration. So it's not just go buy a commercial unit, bring it in, stick the fuel in it, and dry it. I've got to be able to put it in those containers and do it in a safe manner. So it's not as simple for Savannah River to go to dry storage as some of the other sites, because their fuel's in a different configuration and a similar one for them.
The other consider is what I just said earlier, is dry storage is just another form of storage. It is not a disposition.
Thank you. Well, I guess are we far enough along with this to consider it for our next vote for our next full board meeting?
hope so.
Okay.
One thing that I briefly put a comment to you is where we talk about the 22 metric tons of heavy metal, you just make it all bundles. That way it'd be a lot easier to explain.
I thought about that, but the bundle count changes constantly. The tonnage is just.
I totally understand metric tons heavy metal. We just hadn't discussed it. If other people are okay with that, that's fine with me. I was just trying to keep it more consistent.
One of the reasons that we use bundles is because I can have the same type of fuel, it looks exactly the same on the outside. It could have 10 metric tons of heavy metal, I'm exaggerating, and this one could have 1. And you're not going to know that by looking at it. You have to go to the paper. We use the bundles because it's actually a storage configuration and capacity limit for us, so it makes more sense to use that as our performance measure. That's why we use the bundles. And I can only have 3,650 bundles.
Right now you have, I think, a little bit over 3,200.
3,036, and it may be 39.
You see, the number keeps changing, so that's why I use metric
We are
tons.
getting receipts, so that's why the number changes.
I know. I mean, I'm willing to put the bundle number in, but it'll be only good as of today.
Okay, so we will have this ready for a vote in the full board meeting next meeting. Are there any other topics for?
Larry, before you leave that, I'd like to suggest to you that you designate Dawn to be the recommendation manager rather than myself. She's much more knowledgeable in this topic.
Dawn, would you?
He did all the work, but we could be whatever.
Now you do it.
Okay, you started, you take the rest away.
Tag
It's
team.
whatever.
Tag team.
Tag team, that's fine with me.
Okay. Well, I guess that's all we have for tonight, and if there are no other discussions, the meeting is adjourned. Oh.
Public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yes.
Here? No.
I was reading the wrong.
Yeah, if you want to do, that's why I was going to make a statement, if you want to.
With the governor going to evacuate the coast starting tomorrow. They made the announcement, so Savannah Riverside is closed to non-essential personnel Wednesday through Friday, through that 42-hour period. So.
High school.
And it's mainly because of the roadways. Obviously, once they convert the roads to the one-ways, it's prohibitive for people to cross those roads to get onto site, so.
Not through Saturday, just through Friday?
Did you repeat what the governor declared?
They're
Evacuation
making the
tomorrow.
decision to evacuate the coast. They're gonna
Mandatory evacuation?
Yes.
Well, they
They
only have one
yeah,
time.
they said it was, it was only, you just evacuate.
And I'm
3
getting
o'clock
word
tomorrow.
on my phone that gas is already the shortage of gas. Stations are running out.
People are, stocking up.
I know, gotta go get bread.
So this is Pat McGuire with DOE, just to expand a little bit on what Monty said. So the site follows the requirements of what the governor does for the state. And once she makes her decision about mandatory evacuations, as Monty said, they're going to start at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon for the coastal areas. 2 major thoroughfares that somewhat surround the site, highways 278 and highway 125, all traffic will be going inland, north or west. And so under law, you cannot cross those boundaries. Okay, so if you're coming out of your house and you're living, Earl, you may be impacted. He's coming out of his driveway and he needs to go left and all the traffic's going right, he's not allowed. All lanes are going to be going north and south. And so that's going to prohibit workers coming to work and going home after work. And so from a very conservative decision-making, the site manager, in consultation with all the site presidents of the major contractors, basically said, be conservative to limit work, limit those to only essential personnel. And so we're not going to be doing any work that could potentially create a harmful situation. So If we need to do some of those safety requirements that Jim Kekak's talked about, workers are gonna be here, and they're gonna make sure or the plant is safe at all times. Same with security. Unfortunately, once those workers come to work tomorrow on day shift, they're gonna be there for a minimum of 42 hours. They're not able to go home. Their reliefs are not able to come in. And so their managers and supervisors are telling them, be prepared to stay here at least through Friday. Just like first responders do under certain, they're going into a building when everyone else is leaving. That's what we do at work, okay? There are essential people, they're gonna go in and they're trained and qualified to do that scope of work. And again, it's only those functions that are required to maintain things safe and secure. So we're not gonna be dissolving more fuel, we're not gonna be handling fuel, anything of that nature. So I just wanted to provide a little more context into that. I think you'll probably monitor in your own family situation, home situation. My understanding is we're not expected to have significant weather here, maybe a couple inches of rain. That's a lot, but nothing near the 10, 15, 20 inches that those on the coast may experience. Winds may be 30 miles an hour here. On the coast is going to be much higher. So for those who live downriver, Larry, Earl, others, just be very careful.
I got a bonus room for you.
Yeah, if you want to stay up here, we'll just have to see what happens. But again, just want to put that in context. And I'm sure at the next full board meeting, you'll get more information with regard to if there were any impacts. But we're going to have the forestry service on site, security, making sure things are safe and secure. Okay?
Okay. Thank you, Pat. And so we'll go to the public comment period of the meeting now. So do we have any public comment? Tom Clemens.
Tom Clements, Savannah Riverside Watch, and I live in Columbia, and I have a friend who lives about 5 feet from the marsh in Darien, Georgia, so I'm a little worried about her. Anyway, I just want to make a comment about, you've probably seen the news about Russia backing out of the U.S. plutonium disposition agreement. I don't know what impact this is going to have. I don't know if Pat has any insight, but I have not seen a good translation of exactly what he was said. But what I've seen reported in English, there were a couple of wacky things that he was demanding to renegotiate the agreement. One of them was something like if the U.S. Pulls back from countries that entered NATO after 2005. The other one was if the U.S. pays back all the cost of sanctions and for damages. So things that are not going to be on the table. But in many ways, the agreement has already pretty much been in abeyance. The MOX program, as we know, is in great trouble. And actually, Article 9.6 of the agreement says that if funds are not available on either side to carry out the project, that it's dependent on those funds. I think it uses the word appropriations, I think. It's one sentence. The U.S. has not, the Congress has not been appropriating money to carry out the MOX project. It's been quite clear for some time. You've heard me say it many times. So part of Lindsey Graham's argument for continuing MOX is the Russian agreement. So if that is, in fact is gone, I think it removes some of the impediment for what DOE has been trying to do, shut down the project. But I really don't know what's going to happen. But as I've said many times before to you, is keep your eyes open on what's going to be happening, because you could have 13 tons of plutonium or an additional 7 fall under your purview, and potentially other material if it were brought here if MOX goes down. So I think you need to be quite attentive, and I don't think anybody's going to really know the situation coming up, say in October, October meeting. But at some point, I think you need to get an update from somebody in government exactly what's happening with the agreement and what the impact of Mr. Putin's actions are going to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Any other comments from the public? Hearing no other comments, the meeting is adjourned.
so you're going back
Management Committee. Members are Virginia Jones, Vice Chair, Louis Chavis, Susan Corbett, Don Gillis, David Hoyle, Daniel Kaminsky, John McMichael, Harold Simon, and Nina Spinelli. Our committee purpose is up on the screen. You may take a minute and read it if you'd like. Moving on. Recommendation status update. We have an open recommendation, number 336, waste management milestones. A draft recommendation, commend the originators of the double stacking idea. Our next meeting is October the 11th, 6:30 p.m. 6:30 p.m. to 8:20 p.m. here at the DOE Meeting Center, 230 Village Green Boulevard, Suite 220.
That's not our committee.
Yeah, that's.
I hope we're not
That's
meeting
not our
twice.
Okay, thank you. That's why I kind of hesitated, but I was like, maybe something.
Maybe you did not totally.
Yeah. Presentation today is SWPF integration update by Mr. Keith Harp at SRR. But at this point in time, we will have a point of contact status update by Mrs. Sunny Blanco.
Good afternoon. Hello. Yes, we had the agency update last week in the full board meeting, and nothing has changed since then. But we do have our totals for the fiscal year for all our operating facilities. So I'm going to share that with you today. I'm talking about fiscal year 2016 from October 1, 2015 until September 30 of 2016. In our defense waste processing facilities, we poured a total of 135 canisters. At this point in our mission, we have poured a total of 4,105 canisters. The Saltstone production facility has processed in 2016 a total of 1,506,010 gallons of low-level waste into grout. Our ARP-MCU processed a total of 1,129,518 gallons of salt waste. And from the solid waste program standpoint, the facility disposed of 5,702 cubic meters of low-level solid waste, 1,205 cubic meters of low-level waste from Naval Reactor Program, and the facility also shipped 21.2 cubic meters of mixed low-level waste off-site. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great update. And we're glad to have you back.
Thank you.
At this time, we will have Mr. Keith Hart from SRR come up and begin his presentation.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Good. Here you go, sir. Okay, good evening. My name is Keith Hart. I work for Savannah River Remediation, program manager for the liquid waste integration with the salt waste processing facility. So we'll get into this. We got acronyms for the group. If you're not familiar with our acronyms, they can be a little troubling at times, so we put that sheet in. For the agenda, we got a video. It's about a 6-minute video I'm going to let you guys watch. Hopefully it works, James. And then we'll get into accomplishments and the plan for execution. So I'll let you go ahead and start the video.
This updated animated conceptual illustration was developed by Savannah River Remediation, the liquid waste contract 49B5 riser to a predetermined location adjacent to MCU. Phase 1 installed new piping down the rock bank on the east side of Tank 49, and Phase 2 installed new piping from the edge of Tank 49 to the rock bank, connecting the two pieces together. An additional modification you will note is where the decontaminated salt solution piping exits at the southeast corner of the SWPF building. This piping was installed by the SWPF project and was left capped for future tie-ins. SRR has modified this piping by extending the end of the pipe as close as possible to the existing inter-area transfer line that was installed from H-Tank from Tank 50 to the Saltstone processing facility. This transfer piping will remain in this configuration until SWPF receives their authorization to operate, or ATO, from the Department of Energy. Next, you will see the modifications which began in fiscal year 2016, but are planned to complete in fiscal year 2017. The first change you will note is at the opposite end of the Phase 1 piping. SRR is proceeding with installation of
Installation of.
Phase 3 of this new SWPF feed piping. This third phase will take the piping from the bottom of the east rock bank to as close as possible to the final tie-in point adjacent to MCU. This piping will remain in this configuration until SWPF receives an ATO from the Department of Energy. The next fiscal year 2017 modification you will observe is scheduled to initiate in the fourth quarter of the fiscal year, which is past the currently approved liquid waste contract and will be completed in fiscal year 2018. However, the plan is for the liquid waste contractor to secure operations at MCU and DWPF, then drain and flush the necessary transfer lines to reduce radiation rates for the workers. They will then proceed with the tie-ins of the piping previously installed by the SWPF project on the west side of the SWPF building to the Low Point Pump Pit, or 511S. During this same period, jumper modifications will occur inside the Low Point Pump Pit to allow MCU to continue to operate post-tie-in of the SWPF influent and effluent piping. While the SWPF piping is tied into the Low Point Pump Pit building, the pipes will be protected with dummy Hanford connectors to prevent the transfer of any materials to or from SWPF. Here, the modifications you will see are scheduled after SWPF receives their ATO from the Department of Energy, currently planned for fiscal year 2018-2019. Upon receipt of the authorization to operate the SWPF, the liquid waste contractor will proceed with securing operations at MCU, DWPF, and Saltstone, drain the necessary transfer lines, including the H to Z inter-area transfer line, and flush the higher activity lines with flush water to reduce radiation rates for the workers. The contractor will then proceed with the final tie-ins and final jumper modifications to support the startup of the SWPF. The first change you will note is the internal jumper piping modifications within the Low Point Pump Pit. The second change is the final tie-in of the DSS piping previously modified in fiscal year 2016. This will require the Low Point drain tank to be placed into operational service for the first time in its history. The H to Z inter-area transfer line typically holds about 6,000 gallons of
So a version of that video was used at industry days for the liquid waste RFP. It's been very handy for the department and for us to communicate what the plan is. So we get into accomplishments that SRR has completed to date and preparations for SWPF. The east transfer lines, if you're familiar with the site, James, I'm gonna try to step over here to the poster. This is the liquid waste facility in H area. Oops, I get feedback there. So the east transfer lines, if you're familiar with where SWPF is, that tie-in is on that dirt road. It's a forestry road. It goes right along beside SWPF. So that scope is, as the video pointed out, to the point to where we've got the new transfer line for SWPF right up to the tie-in point. We've already got the tie-in piece of pipe fabricated, sitting there staged, ready to go, waiting on the department to receive ATO, which is authorization to operate SWPF. We'll excavate that area and make that final tie-in. Next slide. For the west transfer lines, you see in the upper picture, this was an original picture from back in the 1980s when DWPF was originally built. That's the way the piping looked then. Just the magnitude that you can see from the picture, all of this area here, the concrete cell itself is below grade. So the excavation itself is going to be about 25 feet deep, 75 feet long, about 48 feet wide. So a lot of work we have to do to get ready for that, and we're in the process of doing that. We actually had an industry day today for the vendors to come out and put in the sheet piling and actually do the excavation. So we are well on track. As you can see, the design and specification is complete. And again, we just briefed the vendors today. We did complete final interference as well out here in the area in front of the 511S building. So this building is sitting on top of that concrete cell. So everything that you see here is below this grade. So we did complete interference and identifications. We've completed the DCS, digital control system, hardware installation. That's done as well. And our teams are up to 2 times a week meeting to make sure that information is flowing and that we are staying on track. The last bullet here is something that we at SRR are very happy to be able to talk about. We need about 23 RADCON personnel to do this excavation and do the tie-in work. Instead of going out and doing a hire program that would keep people on board for about 1.5 years, we went back to Parsons, who is the EPC contractor at SWPF, and we worked out between them, us, and the Department of Energy, a subcontract to them directly to go hire their people early and bring their RADCON techs in. We're going to train them. We're going to use those guys in our job up through the end of 17, and then we're going to roll them right back to Parsons so nobody has any outgoing personnel at the end of this task. So we're really happy to see that unfold, and they are in the process of doing interviews right now. So good work between the companies and the department. Next slide. So for blend and feed modifications, we have to get the feed ready for SWPF and get the feed lines itself done. This is a picture of tank 49 over an H-tank farm. You can see from the edge of the tank here, going through this little rain protection hut, you can see the tarps coming down this rock bank. This is, in the video, this is phase 1 of the feed piping, and this was phase 2. And then phase 3 comes out at the bottom of the rock bank and goes to the final tie-in point just outside of MCU. So that work is underway. Tank 21 is the blend tank because the waste going to SWPF will be a higher curie count than what we use today at MCU. We're having to put some extra shielding up at the blend tank just to protect the co-located workers. That's it. At Defense Waste Processing Facility modifications, this is a picture inside of the 511S building that you saw earlier. We had all this steam piping that was installed from a previous project back when the building was originally developed and built. We're going to use the piping, as you can see, that goes below grade here. We DNR'd all that existing piping, but we're going to use those ports for future safety class instrumentation, thermal wells, thermometers, to measure temperature in the cells as the new waste streams come into DWPF. So that work is completed as well. And then getting into the individual tanks, tank 21, again, this is where the shielding that we're going to put in to protect the co-located workers. It'll be mounted to the bottom of this steel platform. That work's in progress. We plan to finish that up this month of October, and that'll finish that scope up. The pumps that are installed in tank 21 will be used, as well as the transfer pump and the slurry pumps. So no other modifications to tank 21 are anticipated at this time. So we have developed and issued the shielding calcs. We've completed the design, and again, the construction is underway, and we'll finish that up this month. For tank 49, very busy slide, but tank 49 is a very busy tank. This is the riser that we'll use to feed SWPF. As you can see, the roadway colors of the piping going up and down. Again, this was phase 1 that you saw earlier. This is phase 2. Both of those phases are complete. The piping is installed. That's been backfilled and ready for testing. Phase 3 is this blue line down here that will come off the rock bank and get to the final tie-in point in the yellow circle. So phase 3 is starting next week, as a matter of fact. Piping is fabricated, designs are complete, work packages are ready. We'll run that blue line, that last section, we'll complete it somewhere mid next year. And then the yellow circle area will be, just like on the DSS side I showed you on the east transfer line, it'll be sitting there staged, ready to go. Again, waiting on ATO to be given for SWPF, and then we'll excavate that area in about 4 to 6 week period and make those final tie-ins. And then SWPF will be ready, MCU will be suspended. Oh, go back one more real quick and I'll talk this. B3 riser here is what we're going to use between it and the valve box. We've made some modifications to the valve box at tank 49 so that when this work kicks off, which will happen during the initial tie-ins of SWPF, we'll begin here modifying this riser, which today is currently feeding MCU. But to allow us to work on that to get it ready for SWPF, we're going back to this riser and the valve box, making some minor modifications today to get those up to speed, up to ready, so we can use those to feed MCU while we're working on the B5 riser. Those modifications are putting in new valves, new jumpers in the valve box, and testing the pump that's been installed all this time, never been used. So we're just testing it and making sure it'll operate, and then we'll put it in service. And big risk there is that the pump doesn't work. If it doesn't, we have one stage ready to go in. So we'll go into the updates here. So the continued operations at MCU, again, the pump mods, the design is in progress. We're getting ready to start running the electrical. The valve box mods, we have fabricated the blanks. That's complete. We actually installed the blanks last week, and we were planning to leak check tomorrow. There's been a change in our schedule, so we'll actually leak check next week. I don't know if you guys have heard about our schedule, but so we'll fabricate a new jumper out of that, getting the new design ready to go. We took measurements of the nozzles while we were in there, so we've got that information now. And we'll have to modify the top of the valve box cover itself to allow us access to those new valves. The fabrication and installation of the backfill, again, phase 1 and 2 are complete. Phase 3, design is done, work packages are done, piping fabrication itself is done. All we have to do is start excavations, and we'll again start on that next week. And then phase 4, excuse me, which is the tie-in at the top. It runs across tank 49 tank top. We'll start that work after the initial tie-ins of SWPF during that 6-month outage window. So the DWPF modifications, that's a picture of 511S. If you go to those next slide, you'll see that we have leak detection boxes. The design itself is complete. The interior software, the hardware, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, is already installed. We completed that. The software process is underway. Sump pump jumpers are being fabricated this year in FY17. We are task ready, as you can see, to install the LDBs of the leak detection plugs and the connectivity probes. We've completed the fabrication of the first jumper required for MCU operations, continued operations. The fabrication of the crossover jumper for the precipitate cell is underway. We'll complete that in this fiscal year as well, prior to entering the outage. thermal well jumper, thermal well assembly. All of that will be done this year as well, this fiscal year. And then the safety class interlock for the non-intrusive scope, that scope will also be executed or be prepped, ready to go. Missile shielding down outside of 511. It's like a gate that goes, like a fencing that goes in front of some sensitive equipment. We'll put that up in the next year. And then we'll finish the jumper fabrication procurements. And then we'll finish or continue to work on the consolidated hazards analysis for this scope, currently scheduled to complete in early 18 to be given to the department to complete their safety evaluation review. That allow us, we have 2 different CHAP reviews that we're doing, one for MCU continued ops, that obviously will be done next year, and then the following for SWPF will be done in 18. And then, of course, many terms for this. Some people call it the Big Dig. Some people call it SWPF tie-ins. Pick whatever term you want to use. This is what it's going to look like. What you see here on the screen, this is the actual 511S building. This is grade coming down. This is the piping that comes from the tank farms into 511S from tank 40 and tank 49. These are the lines that Parsons put in here under the SWPF project. These are the lines that are leaving 511 going to DWPF. And then this is Spaghetti Junction here where all the piping interacts and intersects with each other. So the sheet piling that you see, again, the vendors were in this morning. We briefing those guys, trying to get proposals in from them. The sheet piling is 31 feet in length, 19-inch sheets. So we'll drive those in a hydraulic push fashion. You can see the slots that are cut out for the transfer piping. The design calls for about 3 feet of clearance on each one of those. All the transfer piping that's in the ground is in concrete sarcophagus, so there's no very minimal chance of any contact with that while we're doing that. So they'll install the sheet piling. They'll excavate inside the sheet pile area, get down to an 8-foot elevation. When they get below 8 feet, they put in these, what they call whalers and struts, to hold the sheet piling up, keep pressure against those, keep the walls from caving in as pressure from the outside comes in. Again, the excavation total, about 25 feet deep, and 75 feet wide, or long, 48 feet wide. Go to the next slide. This is just a quick schematic or configuration drawing of the piping. Again, from SWPF, 2 jacketed lines, 2 lines in each jacket, coming from the tank farms, going to DWPF, and this would be the 511 piece that you see. The blue piping that you see is the piping that will be modified by the contractor, liquid waste contractor at that time. That is downstream of the current SRR contract with the department on the liquid waste contract. But we're staged to turn that over to the incoming contractor seamlessly. So we don't have any issues there. So current status. Fabrication of the piping spool pieces is well underway. We will have that done prior to entering into the outage, which is our last day would be June 30th. Completion of the design for the shoring, again, complete. The RFP is complete, and vendors, we're anticipating them having proposals into us by the end of the month. Completion of the scope of work, as I mentioned, award of the contract sometime around mid to late November. Removal of the excavation interferences will kick in just as soon as the vendor mobilizes and gets on site. And then installation of the sheet piling next year, calendar year, first quarter of the calendar year, the sheet piling should be installed. And then excavation of soil down to the level for the whalers and struts, probably 30 to 45 days after the sheet piling's in, somewhere in that neighborhood to get that excavation done. And then they plan to wrap up their scope by the end of April, early May, and then we'll be staged for direct forces to go in and finish the work once we get down to that level. And of course, SRR will be task ready to do the flushing of the transfer lines that are in that excavation area starting on July 1st. when the new contractor comes in. So again, this is an original picture of 511 that we'll be working to. This was taken back in the mid-1980s when we were all in kindergarten. Some of us were, right, Dave? Hey. So what we got is, you can see again, this is the wall of 511, piping coming out. As I mentioned a minute ago about the concrete sarcophagus, you can see that the concrete is poured here, and what the craft did at the time, the construction craft, they actually built forms over that and poured concrete right over the top of the pipes to protect them so they could get the gilsulate in. So on one hand, that's going to be a pain, right, because we got to go in and chip away concrete. On the other hand, it really helps us a lot with shielding and protecting the piping. So everything's got its good and bad to it, right? So we'll be going in, modifying the pipe that comes, you can't see it in this picture very well, but the red line that you see coming all the way across will be modified. This line will be modified, and this blue line will go in and tie in. These two blue lines go in and tie into spare nozzles coming right out of the cell walls. So we'll make those modifications. Three of the lines, excuse me, the three blue lines tie into nozzles that are not used, so those won't be bad. The red line has 3 major line breaks that we'll be working that will have the radiological consequence to them. And I think that's it, isn't it, James? No, titanium. We're also, SRR is also scoped by the department with the increased throughput that SWPF will be bringing through the system. Same process as what MCU uses today, just more of it, right? We're at about 1.5 million gallons a year through MCU, and SWPF will start out at 4.6, 4.7 million gallons a year, and they'll go immediately up to about 6 million and then on up to 7.2 at a 9 million gallon rate is what that's based on. So when you get into that, that's a lot more MST sludge coming through the process, which increases the amount of titanium that comes into DWPF. So this titanium testing, we went out and contracted Vitria State Lab up in Virginia. They made some new glasses with higher titanium levels than what we currently process at. And it takes the current waste acceptance criteria limit from 2 weight percent up to a 6 weight percent titanium in the glass. So far, the models that have been done are showing very positive results. Unfortunately, I can't tell you it's done, but invite me back and have dinner when I get here. That'd be great. Invite me back in about 6 to 9 months, and I'll be able to tell you that we're done and everything's good. But all the modeling right now does show that we have good results so far. So I'll let you guys know at the next update. And that is it. Okay. So,
Do we have any
is this where questions come in?
Go ahead, Dave.
David Hoyle, Cab. Keith, I think this is the best presentation we've seen all night.
Ah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Very information heavy, but very complete too. Have you run into any unexpected interferences in your excavation so far?
So, yes. Yeah, we did. When we did the original design, and James, can you pull that picture back up of 511? Might be better. Yeah, right. That's pretty close right there. So when we were building the design for the excavation, we found that here at the corner of the building, we were originally going to slope the banks of the excavation out and not use sheet piling on the north and south ends. And what we found was when we made that initial interference evaluation, that there's a duct bank that runs across from the ventilation skid over to the building, and it actually got right into our excavation zone. So we had to go back and redesign that, and that's what caused us to put sheet piling on all 4 sides. So excellent question, and the answer is yes. But we've recovered from that, obviously, in a timely fashion.
Susan Corbett, Cab. So this is a lot of pipe. Must be many, many miles of piping. What do you have in place to be able to detect if there's a leak somewhere, and how will you remedy that? How will you fix it? You've got it so well covered, so well contained. How will you detect it, and then how would you fix it?
So a couple of pieces of information. One, all the piping that we install will be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 200 linear feet. So it's not as big as it really looks on just in the mind, right? Because it looks like it's a lot more than that. So about 200 linear feet. It is jacketed piping, so it's a stainless steel core inside of a carbon steel jacket. What we do is when the piping is fully installed, we x-ray it first of all to make sure the welds are good, but then we pressurize the jacketed area to make sure that the jacket itself and the core is intact and everything's holding. We do that before we ever place it into service. And if we do find that it leaks down, and we have seen that before on certain tests, we go in, we send helium in, and we test it again, find out where it's leaking, and we send craft back in and make those repairs. So we make sure we get an excellent piece of pipe in the ground.
Okay. If there are no more questions, thank you, Mr. Keith.
Okay, thank y'all. Have a good night.
We have a draft recommendation to commend the originators of the double stacking idea, which is submitted by David Hoyle. So I will turn this over to David, and we're going to get a quick briefing of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Earl. David Hall, CAB. We recently got some briefings on the progress of the double stacking idea, and it's been a long time coming, but they're making good progress on it, and it occurred to me that the originators of that idea need to be recognized somehow. So let me go through this recommendation. The background starts out, the Department of Energy's Savannah River site has 2 glass waste storage buildings. Each glass waste storage building is capable of holding about 2,200 canisters of vitrified high-level waste. Glass waste storage building number 1 became operational in 1996 and filled the capacity by 2006. Glass waste storage building number 2 began operation at about 2006 and was originally expected to become filled by this year, which would necessitate construction of a 3rd glass waste storage building to hold the remaining canisters. The first 2 storage buildings cost about $80 million apiece. Construction of glass waste storage building number 3 was estimated to cost between $98 to $138 million. The canisters in the glass waste storage buildings are intended to be for eventual disposal in a deep geologic repository for high-level waste and spent nuclear fuel. Previously, Yucca Mountain was intended to be the repository. However, the current administration believes it is not a workable option, and DOE initiated a consent-based siting process for establishing a repository location which would become operational by 2048. In March 2015, the President tasked DOE with establishing a separate disposal site for dispense high-level waste, which theoretically could be sited, licensed, and constructed and operated more quickly than a common repository for both commercial and defense waste. In any case, the glass waste at SRS is likely to continue to be stored here for decades. Based upon a prior briefing in January 2015, the SRS CAB recommended, quote, if research results indicate that double-stack containers do not pose a threat to the public and environment, and utilize this temporary storage method while a federal repository is sought. DOE has implemented this recommendation and began double stacking of high-level waste canisters during June 2016. Just get rid of the "the" there. Double stacking of canisters is expected to increase storage capacity in glass waste storage building number 1 from 2,254 to 4,508 canisters. This will create adequate safe interim storage through fiscal year 2026, significantly postponing the large expense to construct another storage building. Here's the discussion. The idea to take advantage of the design of existing glass waste storage building number 1 to safely double stack high-level waste canisters was brilliantly innovative and will result in substantial savings to the Department of Energy and taxpayers. The originators of this idea deserve to be publicly recognized and rewarded as a demonstration of the appreciation of the government and citizens of the nation and inspire others. So, I propose that the Savannah Riverside Advisory Board, Citizens Advisory Board, recommend that Dewey identify the persons or persons who first broached the idea of double stacking, arrange for a substantial incentive reward to these originators for their innovative idea, and introduce these persons at a future SRS CAB full board meeting so that we may publicly honor them. Now, I got some feedback from Jenny that she would like me to change that word in recommendation number 2 from reward to award. Go ahead.
As you're reading it, I'm thinking maybe it just needs to be a separate sentence. And so, for example, number 4, we talk about that their name should be submitted for an appropriate award category also. I assume that there are different awards in the scientific field that this might qualify for. So number 2, I'm thinking would be a monetary reward, and maybe add a number 4 that would nominate this for an award category. Award would be an honor, a poster, or a plaque, a named category, something like that.
I see. I kind of liked your first idea, which was to change reward to award, because it kind of makes it a little more generic in terms of both
I go with
an
that.
award as well as perhaps monetary. Now, I did get some feedback from DOE on this recommendation, and I'll put it to the committee to decide what to do about it, but they were uncomfortable with receiving this as a recommendation, which of course, perhaps they can explain why, but I think it's because they would be obligated to respond to a recommendation, and they probably are uncomfortable with responding to a recommendation suggesting monetary rewards to either federal or contractor employees. I'm not sure which. Maybe Pat can comment on that. But that's the only real feedback I got from DOE on this particular recommendation. Pat, could you comment on that, or do you know anything about DOE's comfort level with this in terms of making it a recommendation versus a letter?
Why don't you guys discuss, and then I'll add if I need to. You know, look, I think it's, I don't want to interject anything. You know,
Okay.
If that's okay, I'd rather hold my comment to the end.
All right, then I would welcome feedback from the committee.
Well, I like the idea of giving accolades to those that deserve it. I think this is a very nice way to do it. Setting is perfect. I have no idea what DOE can or cannot do, but at least maybe a plaque or something just to show appreciation. But I don't know the ins and outs of the awarding system at DOE.
Dawn Gillis Cab, I think it's a wonderful idea too. And as far as being a letter versus a recommendation, a letter is just something that goes into the file, and these people, we would never know about them. So I understand why you've got it as a recommendation, and I also can understand why DOE would be a little reluctant for the cab to say, go give somebody some money.
That's why I wanted to go with Jenny's suggestion of award. It's a little more generic and doesn't suggest money so much.
And I'm a little hesitant about the word substantial. I know what you're trying to say. These people really did a phenomenal job, and they need to be, you know, if they haven't already, they might have already gotten some kind of, but we don't know that. I haven't come up with any other idea. But you don't want them to just go, you guys did a good job. You know, want to do something that really makes it, that tell them. And I know, and I understand your idea too is to let other people know that if you come up with some good idea that's going to save, you know, $100 million, that you'll get recognized too, or that so that's kind of where, that's your big point here, is to get that word out.
Yeah, that's why I put the incentive in there. So are you suggesting take substantial action?
Yeah, arrange an incentive award.
Okay.
So, but,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I have a quick question. I don't know how it works for the DOE side, but is there a reason they don't specify who came up with something and it's just the Department of Energy, that they don't name a specific person as far as that person being subject to lawsuits in the future? Like if this happens to not work 50 years from now and it does something horrible, does this, by naming this person out in public, does it open that person up?
No, because DOE is the one that still has to do all the approvals and the safety basis, and no, that should not open up
I just
anybody
know
for
how
that.
it works on like the Department of Social Service side when a case manager puts their name out there and gets recognized, and then something can happen, and I just want to make sure that that person is protected, that it's a good intention.
Right, I don't think they're in any jeopardy, but, and I wouldn't even say that DOE or the contractors are reluctant to name these people. They simply didn't know when I asked at the last meeting.
David, Dan Kaminsky, CAP. Just a couple questions. What's the overall cost differential? What did they actually save? Do we have that calculation somewhere?
I don't know how much, but they've avoided.
I don't know what double stacking ended up costing, but obviously it's far less than the building,
What's
right?
the cost of the building, right? Would that be?
Well, the cost of building a building was $98 to $138 million. I don't know what the cost of the double stacking project is. Maybe Sonny does.
Yes, this is Sonny Blanco, Department of Energy. There are some savings when you compare the building to the double stack. Definitely, the overall effort has saved money out front, because the building or the other alternative that we were looking at has an upfront investment, which it was really hard to afford. We just could not afford it. That's why we went to this idea. Overall, when you look at it overall, it's probably going to be about $100 million for when you compare the building to the double stack. Even though you also have to take into consideration that after the double stacking is done, just as when the building was going to get done, we were going to have to supplement with more storage, because we were not going to have enough. So we would have to take a look at the overall effort to calculate exactly how much it's going to save. But definitely out front, we decided to pursue this option because the investment up front was so small, and we could spread it over several years to make it happen.
And this was more operational than project expense too.
Yes, because double stacking is considered an operation, and we're moving canisters around, which we do every day, and double stack them with a minor modifications in the canister locations, storage locations. And project, there was going to be definitely a building there that needed to be constructed, and several millions of dollars over several years to invest. So, can I answer your question?
Yep. So the flip side of that, reason why I was a little interested in like the differential, so it is pretty much the full building, since it seems like double stacking doesn't cost much at all. And this isn't necessarily for you, David, but does anyone know of any already prescribed programs within either DOE or the U.S. government with those types of sharing? So if you save $1 million, sometimes there's programs and such that you get a certain prescribed percentage or some level of award, not necessarily out into infinity, where we have $100 million. I wouldn't expect anyone doing their job to be rewarded in the millions of dollars for this, but obviously I am in agreement with you that something substantial to show the effort, because it was a very legitimate recommendation to improve upon the current process.
I don't know any such program, but.
There used to be. There
I
used
know-
to be.
I had heard of
what was,
some-
There was a, what was a way back, there used to be the program that's, you know, that if you put in some kind of that saved money, that you would get a percentage of that back. What was that?
Suggestion incentive.
Yeah, but,
awards.
well, it wasn't just suggestion, there was a technical program that was about, 10 years ago.
Yeah,
I don't know, maybe
that's
more
actually
than
kind
that.
of what was ringing in the back of my head is
But I don't know
what
if
I
that
was
still
recalling.
exists, I don't think that
But
still exists.
I don't know that whoever came up with this idea went that route, probably not.
It was hard to manage, because I did some of that managing. I don't even remember the name of it now, but this would have fallen right directly into that, so your turn. After all this discussion, he's gonna say, we can't do that.
So Pat McGuire with DOE. So, yeah, I don't want to influence your discussion, so are you done?
Sure.
Okay. So, let me just, first and foremost, outstanding. Obviously, I don't think anybody is saying, oh, these guys shouldn't have, or women, men and women shouldn't have done this. Outstanding accomplishment, no doubt about it, okay? So from the department standpoint, what is the best way to document your thoughts? Okay, what's the best way to do that? And so by the charter and your standard operating procedures, you have recommendations and things of that nature, and that's what it's just formatted in. And so is this really a recommendation on cleaning up or anything of that nature? That's generally what you do, is provide input and advice and recommendations to the department on cleanup, future missions of the site and things of that nature. So
Budget.
this on budget and things of that nature. Okay, so recommendations on what we should do to, you know, within the EM charter and stuff. So don't know if this fits a recommendation so much as compared to what you've done in the past, okay? The other thing is, number 2, with regard to telling the department and/or a contractor, you need to incentivize, recognize, do something like that. Generally outside of what I would expect from a recommendation. If things are, and again, this is how to handle a very positive thing, so I know what I'm saying is very negative, and I don't want to grasp defeat out of the jaws of victory, because this is a victory. This is a great thing. So how is the best to document your desires and your thoughts and your accolades that you'd like to have? We can bring them to we can obviously bring them to a CAB committee. You can recognize them. Your meeting minutes are recorded. Does it really fit a recommendation, though? And singling again, the item number 2 is somewhat challenging to recommend an award for an individual or group of individuals. I just, maybe outside of what a recommendation is from a CAB perspective on cleanup activities. Again, this is all very positive. We want to recognize them. Nina, when they make a decision, and if this fails in 10 years, it's on the Department of Energy. It's our decision, but it's great information. So how to best capture this, I don't have an answer for you, okay? It just, we can bring them to the CAB. You can recognize them publicly. We can have your photograph taken with them.
Do you know who they are?
I personally do not. They work in the waste area, so I personally do not know. I don't know if it's one person, 20 people. I personally don't know. But we'll definitely do that. But a recommendation to do that, it seems like it's maybe outside the normal scope of what you would normally recommend.
Sonia, I know you said you know, and obviously you're probably not going to say anything right now, but knowing what you know about the people, what would you think they would want? She might be. I think she is, because she's turning really pink.
Under your seat, a new
car. But I
She's
mean,
going, yes, let's put this
Because, I mean, I guess, and I like this recommendation a lot, I guess my thinking is that every day people are probably doing something like this at the site. It probably just doesn't get maybe as public or as big, like things like this.
Yeah, we generally each contractor, we have several major contractors. When people do good things, they really recognize them. They put them in their newsletters. They have we have celebrations and things of that nature. So generally, we try to recognize not all employees who are doing good things. We recognize in public, and we kind of discipline in private. And so this is something generally the contractors do, and they like doing this, really highlighting the accomplishments so it can breed more accomplishments. And Earl may even have a great idea one day if he sees David. If he sees David getting recognized, man, I can do that too. So
And that's kind of the point
Yeah, and that's the
here.
point. So I agree 100% with the thoughts here. It's how to best communicate that. And
Sonia, do you have
I've
any
got a
ideas
thought
on
here.
that? You can go first, Dawn. Just thinking since you know
yeah.
them, if they'd want to come to a CAB meeting or something like that.
What if we make this a little broader and use this as an example
Yeah,
of
inspiration.
someone and still say we want these people to come in, but to say in order to get
It's-
more innovative ideas and to be able to get the cleanup done faster, cheaper, more, and that ties in with our scope. But to use this one as the main example, because it's, and maybe give us something that tells us about other big things in the DOE that have been brought up by DOE or contractor people that have gotten awards and things like that for saving money and doing things faster.
I share 100% what Pat is saying. This is Sonny Blanco, DOE. The thing is that the Department of Energy make requests to the contractor to look into issues that we may have, and we ask them for alternatives. And they take a look at ideas that might have been proposed in the past. This was one of them. And a group of people get together and they work on it and they come up with the idea that wins, that we all like and we think that can move forward with. The contractors, and I'm sure SRS is the same way, they do great things all the time. I mean, there are several ideas that have been done in the past, and I think that what you're saying, I like a lot what you're saying, and not to single just this one thing out, because there's so many other ideas that have been implemented and people that have come up with those ideas and they were not recognized in the past. So I think that along those lines, I think that that's a good thing. And to recognize them, I think it's great too. I'm not sure the recommendation, I don't know if a letter, something that can go to, I don't know, the procedures as far as going to the department versus the contractor. I don't know, but it could be something that the CAB wants to start recognizing when there are remarkable ideas that are implemented that actually save money to the taxpayers. I mean, we're all taxpayers. We want that to happen every day if we can. So that's my 2 cents.
Excuse me. No, I'm not taking this one over, Dave.
So let me kind of have an open-ended question. So in some recommendations, you request a presentation for X, Y, or Z information. And there's an alternate mechanism to do that. You can revise the work plan rather than developing a recommendation. That's really, having a presentation really doesn't, it gives you information, but it's not giving us advice. And so that's what I'm seeing here. We can do what you're asking. We can bring individuals if you'd like to recognize them. Have no problem with that. It just doesn't have the flavor to me of a recommendation. I like what Dawn said, a suggestion, maybe describe the worker incentive programs for the various contractors and maybe.
And some of the people that have won them and what they've saved.
Yeah, something of that nature. And again, this is such a minor thing of how to get this great thing identified and presented to the CAB, because I know you'd like to recognize them. I think that's a great thing. The means and documentation is just what I'm having a challenge with. And that's not saying you can't do whatever you want to do, obviously. But then if we single this person, these group of people out, and then are we gonna, well, what's substantial? Well, we gave them a plaque. Well, I think you should have given them a bouquet of roses. Well, how big was the plaque? It's 10 by 10. Well, I think it should have been 20 by 20. You know, let each contractor figure that out and what's noteworthy and what's not noteworthy. What's part is what Sonny said. We always are looking for alternatives and better ways to improve things, be more cost effective. And then each individual contractor kind of determines which are those of such significance that they get a performance bonus in their pay and things of that nature. DOE doesn't dictate how they do that, and I don't want to get into the job of that. And that's where number 2 kind of saying, you have to do this. Really, that's outside. Well,
you tell us all the time we can't do that.
Right. And so this is item number 2 is getting to the point of, well, this is, you need to recognize this one versus, well, don't do that one. Same thing, well, I'm almost like the opposite on the disciplinary side. Well, Mary or Jim did something so bad, we want them to be disciplined. Now, I know you would never do that, but where do you draw the line of when your input is being considered or not? I think it's incumbent upon the contractor using their programs and processes to recognize the accomplishment and achievements of their individuals. What they achieve or not, that's up to them. Public, you can recognize them in front of you. If that's what you'd like, we can bring them forward. But getting into the details of number 2, it seems like a little beyond what we would do as federal employees, and I think you would do as a CAB.
Well, Pat, is it just possible then to just bring them in and just let the CAB think them? Then that way we just cut out all the rest of the hoopla.
Without a
Something
doubt.
is better than nothing.
Oh, yes, I agree. And that's why this is a great thing, okay? And it's just the mechanism by which we can get to that point.
Well, let me make a suggestion then. I'm okay with losing number 2 because it's so problematic for the department. And I can refashion 1 and 3 to capture the idea that we want to identify and honor them. But I think it's a good thing for the CAB to go on record sometimes when we see something that's this big in terms of savings. That we go on record and say, hey, we recommend you pat these guys on the back. I recognize that maybe a letter would be easier to do or maybe more palatable to some people, but frankly, I don't see anything wrong with the CAB making a recommendation to honor some employees for doing a really good job. Yes, there's a lot of great ideas implemented at the site. There is an incentive awards program at the site, but I haven't heard of an idea like this in a long time.
That saved $100 million.
That saved $100 million. And if there are others, we'd like to hear about them too. And maybe we can even make something out of those. So that's my recommendation. Let's lose number 2, keep it as a recommendation, and maybe add some words about the General Incentive Awards program.
So 100 million or more.
That's our limit.
That's the standard. That's right.
Yes.
John McMichael, CAB. There's no losers in this. Everybody's a winner in here because you're not only are you recognizing the individuals, but you're recognizing the company that they work for. You're recognizing DOE's initiative to be able to follow through with a good recommendation.
That's a big deal.
So, I mean, it also is a good PR thing for us to be able to recognize it, that we're sitting here, not only sitting in many times making a negative comment, but we also, it tells the public we're looking at the positives as well. It's a balanced approach that we're taking as a cab to look at the good, the bad, and I don't want to say the rest of it. So anyway, that we do take an opportunity to recognize ingenuity and vision, and certainly those are all part of that. But I agree with what you said, and for being many years of management and working with contractors as well as my own staff, you really, there's a fine balance. But I think when you do take the initiative, and I appreciate what you did, David. I think it was well written. Certainly points out all the positives there. But I remember very vividly the presentation we got back on the 15th. I was impressed with the depth of the presentation that we got at that time, and the results are certainly very positive. But I think if with all the other things going on, the DOE has to work with, I think having some good positive press out there to the public to see that they are looking for opportunities to save money and expedite the activity, which is the main thing. So it's not just a cost savings, but it expedited the operation as well. So,
And I agree, and again, I just want, it's all a good thing, so I want to, and I know I am coming across negative, but that's, the intent is, this is a great thing, how can we agree? And so, if, again, removing item number 2, if that's, again, that's the CAB's decision, I think that is more palatable, and the other ones we can definitely make happen.
Any objection to doing that?
No.
And the other thing is, you know, the mechanisms through which you communicate to DOE, generally letters aren't done. We do ask you in the annual integrated priority list to give us your input through a letter, and so generally that's one time a year we ask you to do something outside of what a normal recommendation would be. So that really doesn't fit the mold here too. I can see your perspective on this still fits the mold of a recommendation, and so that's all I have to say on that. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, well, before we wrap this up, I'd like to recognize David because David swims deep with the sharks, and he doesn't mind being controversial, and I like to give him a round of applause for even coming up with this.
yeah.
Swims deep with the sharks. I gotta write that one down.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you're a controversial guy. We are now at the public comment section, and it looks like we have nobody except for
Ken,
have anything you want to say?
you've covered everything every time I come up with a question.
That's what we do in this particular committee. Any other
Do you want
discussions?
to officially bring this to the full board?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
I
we
don't know
will
if we
bring
have to
this in.
officially say that.
Do I have to officially say that, Grant? Well, let's officially make this official that we officially bring this to the table at the full board meeting. Thank you,
I
sir.
feel like I served my purpose tonight, so.
Thank you.
With the proper amendments.
With the proper amendments.
Right. I'll fix it.
Co-Chair Jenny, anything? Anybody else? We thank you all for having us here, and it's nice and pleasant in here. It feels nice.
Feels like
Everybody's
chairs.
wide awake. And now we will adjourn and go home.
Yeah, while you still can.